What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to Intel Within Podcast. This is episode 5, one we're calling Looking Over the Precipice. What's up, Chris?
Not much, man. Just there's a. I feel like there's going to be a lot to go over, a lot to discuss, and this is going to be yet another informative podcast. That's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, I think that we should start off the right way this time and do a dad joke.
Ooh, okay. So on these dad jokes, the one that I have written down, this is obviously, they're kind of cheesy. So this one is,
They're
how do you?
supposed to be cheesy.
Yeah, yeah. How do you follow Will Smith in the snow?
Dude, you look for the Fresh Prince.
There you go. Super. That's the dad joke. That is
That's
that's the
right.
one. So I thought that was kind of
That's the
funny. Super
dad
quick.
joke.
There's
That is
what
a
is
good
it?
one. Oh,
There's
yeah.
the other one that I told you. I'm gonna say this for the listeners out there. I was gonna save it for the next one, but this one's pretty good. Is what do you get
Okay.
when the Rock pees?
Oh, dude. He's Dwayning his Johnson. Is that what
he
it is?
he Dwayne's his Johnson.
He Dwayne's his Johnson.
Yeah,
Exactly.
almost like you feel like you got to
Perfect.
say it with an accent.
You kind of do, man.
Yeah.
I'm
So
gonna I'm gonna tell mine. I'm gonna tell mine real quick. So, nice mug, by the way.
oh yeah.
So, did you hear about the guy that dipped his balls in glitter?
No.
Pretty nuts, right? But
Jeez Louise. That's a good one.
I know, terrible.
They're so funny though. They're
Cool,
so I love
man.
them.
Yeah, dude, man, and we're never gonna run out of dad joke material.
Never.
Every day,
Never.
new dad jokes are birthed on Dad Joke Island, and we'll never run out.
Mm-mm.
That's the real
Surplus.
renewable energy right there. It's true.
Hell yeah.
Cool,
Yep.
man. But I think you hit the nail on the head with saying that this is going to be a super informative one,
Mhm.
and I hope people find it to be super informative. And but I'm going to start this one off with a story. I'm going to keep it a little vague, but it has to do with the topic that we're talking about, right? So a long time ago, my first duty station, we all found out that there was a specific capability that the base I was at was trying to bring to it, right? And it was going to take a lot of work. It made the news, all this stuff. Well, we found out eventually that they weren't bringing this capability to the base. And after that information hit us, we learned about all this weird stuff that happened
Mhm.
during the process of this. And one of the weirdest things that happened is the local university saw a massive influx of Chinese students enrolling in their school. A little Catholic university, just couple hundred Chinese students enrolling.
Out of nowhere.
And when out of nowhere,
Mm.
and it all happened shortly after this announcement about this potential cape coming to the base.
Mm.
And then shortly after, they decided that they weren't going to do this because this was all on the news, okay?
Right.
Publications online, the local Air Force, not the local Air Force base, but the local news was talking about it. And when they decided they weren't bringing that capability to the base, all those students, for the most part, disenrolled from the school and bounced.
Oh wow, that's weird.
Obviously, that's mega suspicious. Nothing abnormal about that at all. And the other thing too is that around this base, there's a ton of wind farms, a lot of open land, and the majority of those wind farms were owned by Chinese corporations, or came to be owned by Chinese corporations during the time that I was there. And whether through intermediaries or whatever, but it just kind of goes to show you how insidious some of this really, really is, and in ways that you wouldn't even think about. So, but that's always stuck with me my whole life, or not my whole life, but my whole career. And I come to realize that is just like a tiny grain of sand on a beach of little things that they do to involve themselves in processes and collect information for the most part, you know? So, but anyway, I've always thought that was really interesting. And when you tell people that, they're really surprised to hear it. But some of the other stuff with this is making the news about like the I-50 corridor that runs right
Mhm.
by some of our sensitive sites in the United States.
Mhm.
And all those cell towers all along that highway for, thousands of miles are lined with cell towers that have Chinese equipment in them.
That's in the
And,
United
they
States?
it's in the United States. Yeah. And you can look this
Mm.
up. Like I said, it's on the I-50 corridor. And all those cell towers, like I said, have Chinese components in them. But the US government reached out about, hey, these need to come down, or the pieces that are in those cell towers need to be removed.
Mhm.
And there's basically been no movement on getting rid of those because the money that this company was offered to go in and remove all these components, these Chinese components, and replace them with not Chinese made components was not enough, right? And like I said, they run by, some of our most sensitive bases and the fields around them,
Is that like
which is
the
crazy.
yeah, is it like, the Huawei technology stuff that you're talking about, or like the Huawei towers, or
Yeah, the components are made by not the entire tower, but
Right.
pieces of it, the
Mhm.
transmission pieces, right? And it wouldn't even be the first time if they
Wow.
did go in there and figure out that these pieces had multi-capable, functions. The Marine Corps bought a bunch of laptops from a Chinese company, and I can't remember if we've talked about that personally or on another episode, but they
Mhm.
realized that those laptops were basically bugged,
There's like
and you
800 of
can't
them.
tell me that. Yeah, and they used them for like a year or something like that.
Yep.
But you can't tell me that those pieces are put into that those cell towers along that highway, and they
Mhm.
don't know what they run by.
Sure.
And could those cut off communication? Could those jam certain signals?
Yeah,
All
you'd think
sorts of
they'd
things, all sorts
intercept.
of crazy problems. Right,
That's
all sorts
crazy.
of crazy problems that it could cause, if if they wanted to potentially. But anyway,
Yeah.
just saying. So, but yeah, we'll get more into that for sure. But I just kind of wanted to set the tone about kind of what we're going to get into. Obviously, we're talking about China. Obviously,
Yeah.
we're talking about Russia. If you
Yeah.
saw the graphic on Instagram, you know that we're getting into all of this stuff. Put some pretty intense music on there. If you turn your sound on when you look at the Instagram post, but it's intense for a reason, man.
Yeah.
You know, and yeah, I just kind of wanted to jump right in on that story, and let's kind of begin at the beginning, so to speak, and let's talk about Ukraine and Russia a little more. I know you
Yeah.
have a lot of thoughts and opinions and info on that, so
Yeah, it's, I mean, just like, like I say before, not to like beat a dead horse, but in the other episode that we talked about with Aaron Love on episode 3 was that, we've given over like 100 billion just across the board over to
right.
Ukraine. And it's just one of those things where, you know, I don't understand how people can support this kind of proxy war. But in the hindsight
Hmm.
of it, I've come to look at it as like, okay, cool, we're showing technology that we have, we're showing technology that other allies that NATO has, where it's battle tested that you said in that episode, in the sense where, we're going to go take this thing and go test it out there to see how it works. And then that will give us feedback or not if we need to upgrade something or we need to make hundreds more. But there's so much going on over there. And then recently, not to go off course, but Finland joined
You're
NATO.
good,
Sweden is
dude.
Sweden is set to join, like and follow suit essentially, and so now
Right,
we as NATO in general, or if you just want to call it fucking U.S. with the blue hat, they have acquired more border, and so
nailed it.
now so now Putin was talking a few weeks ago saying how he's going to threaten to move nuclear components to Belarus. I don't know if he's actually done it yet. I haven't seen anything on it, but he was like, "Oh, I'm going to move stuff there," and the Belarusian president or whatever he was
President.
saying, yeah, he was saying that they're still in the talks of it. But I mean, it's just I don't know, man. It just seems so like so set up in the sense of we keep printing money to send stuff over, to give aid, to try to replenish things. And in the back end, it is completely destroying the American dollar and just the economy in general. But it's, I don't know, me personally, like, if you're not a NATO ally, then I'm sorry. That's just me. It's not because I don't like one person more than the other, but it's just, you're not a NATO ally. You haven't joined yet, and for there's reasons why, of course, that I can see on both ends. But I just, it's just, I don't. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't ever remember us having a treaty with Ukraine, like supposedly, not really a treaty, but I guess like a hey, we got your back kind of deal, like Taiwan does, right? Like we told them. I
So
don't
I
remember.
can expand on that piece. So we have had conversations like that before, and the conversation essentially was talking. This is during the Clinton administration, where he basically got Ukraine to hand over the nuclear weapons that they had in
Mhm.
exchange for America backing Ukraine. Okay, obviously that was a long time
Okay.
ago. You and I
Sure.
were single digit kids, right? But that's not the first time countries have gotten into situations like that where they tell a smaller, lesser developed country, hey, if you do this, we'll have your back. You know what I mean? And
Mm.
situations like that have gotten other countries into world wars, for example,
Yeah.
right? Belgium with the UK in World War One, the Germans invaded Belgium, which pulled the UK right into World War One. So we have essentially guaranteed their sovereignty in that regard, through the convincing of them removing their nuclear weapons. So,
Mhm.
and that obviously, like I said, was a long time ago, but I think you hit on a really a lot of great points. And let's be honest, the fact the United States is in Ukraine in the ways that we are has nothing to do with, has less to do with NATO and more to do with the United States trying to bog Russia down in a protracted, really long conflict in Ukraine, bleed their resources dry, right? Knowing that Russia cannot maintain operations the way the United States maintained operations in
Mhm.
Iraq and Afghanistan for as long as it did.
Mhm.
Not to mention all the second and third order conflicts, quote unquote, that we got ourselves into during the global war on terrorism in other countries.
Right.
Right. So they know that we're there essentially to just give Ukraine enough to keep Russia stuck in there and to keep Russia bleeding themselves dry. But again, you touched on another point, right? We're demonstrating capability, battle testing certain things that we have the opportunity to do on the battlefield in real time,
Mhm.
but we're not replenishing those supplies at the rate that we should be if we ended up in another conflict. And obviously that's a
Yeah.
problem because our peacetime supplies, just like some of our NATO allies, have been depleted or on the way to being completely and totally depleted. So it's good, right, that Finland has joined NATO, in my opinion, because they have one of the most deadly, I guess you could say, artilleries, most capable and technologically advanced artilleries in the world.
They're nasty.
So that's good to have, dude. Yeah,
Yeah.
you can't knock that. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Um, but the other thing with it too, man, is the United States wants to keep Russia focused there because the longer they're focused in Ukraine and they're failing, okay,
Mhm.
the more time they're not spending helping out the Chinese and helping the Chinese achieve certain goals. This is just my opinion on this. So I think that the Russians saw an opportunity when the United States pulled out of Afghanistan and the whole debacle that was, right?
Mhm.
And saw a United States that was reeling on its heels, leaving a country we'd spent the last 20 years in, okay? Didn't leave it in a good manner. And I think they saw an opportunity when America was weak to take the opportunity to move into Ukraine, and I do think that they thought they were just going to walk in there, knock
3
some
days.
heads, and this was
Mhm.
going to be it. Yep, through 3 days, right,
Mhm.
and that was it, and that was going to be it, and that it would make the United States look bad, it would make NATO look bad, it would make Russia look really strong, and in turn, right, they could have focused. If that would have happened, they could have turned and pivoted and focused more on some of the more broader global interests with China, right? But instead, they're still there. the United States and NATO, right,
Yep.
are still supporting what's going on in Ukraine and keeping Russia there. Maybe it threw a wrench in some of these plans because I think you would agree that I don't think Xi and Putin really are doing too much without talking to each other anymore.
Right.
Um, so right, and so the longer that Russia is there, the less that it can focus on assisting China. The more frustrations there are in that relationship, and it kind of weakens potentially the broader goals that the Chinese have. Russia didn't walk out of Ukraine as a victor, looking
Mhm.
strong, and then teamed up with the dragon of the East, right?
Yeah.
And now you look like you've got these two really strong superpowers versus potentially the one superpower in the West, the United States. But anyway, that's kind of my thoughts and opinions on that. But
I thought one of the things that popped up, I think it was a little over a month ago, when Ukraine launched, I don't know if it was drones or if it was just straight missiles over into Russia, and it went for two separate air
right,
bases. Dude,
hmm
it those went super far into Russia, and there was no, like, anti-air or any type of, like, defense thing set up to shoot those down, and they landed over there, and
right,
that really just goes to show that, like, they're putting on this front, and they don't have this, like, defense capability that everybody thinks that they have if they step 1 inch over into Russia. They kinda, like, have
hmm
been exposed and, like, getting exposed, and like you said, just kinda holding them at, like, a standstill, but, you know, um,
hmm
and then,
yeah,
what was it? Russia sold weapons to China, now Russia's buying them back because they need a surplus of things.
hmm
People are
yep.
buying oil above,
Buying
60
tires
yeah,
from North
everything.
Korea.
Everything. Yeah, it's
hmm
just,
Dude,
trying to scrape by.
they are, man. You hit the nail on the head that they got exposed, are continuously being exposed.
Mhm.
It's at the point now where it's like they've gone this far, they can't just walk away, and they've put themselves in that position. The United States knows that, right? And honestly, probably a lot of the reason why Xi went and visited Putin there in Moscow had to do with a G pretending like he really wants, peace in the world, although peace between Russia and Ukraine benefits what goes is going on in China, right? The
Mm.
last thing he said to him when he walked away on camera that they're changing, nothing that has happened in the past 100 years is going to be as drastic as what we're about to do, essentially. And I'm paraphrasing, right?
Right.
And all this is on camera, all of this is planned, all of that, right? But Russia does, like you said, they keep getting exposed, and they're going to
Mhm.
keep getting exposed, and they can't pull out. And that's just one of those things that helps us out in a certain way, but in other ways it doesn't, right? Because we've sent how much money to Ukraine, so it's one of those things where there's give and take on what's good and what's bad. We have to take care of ourselves on the other side of that too,
Mhm.
and can't just get rid of all of our peacetime stockpiles. Can't just sit here, and keep funneling money into something if we're not getting anything in return other than basically keeping Russia bogged down in a conflict in Ukraine. And then, heaven forbid, China brokers some sort of peace between the two, right?
Yeah, so Finland joins, right? And then so if
Mm-hmm.
Sweden joins, obviously it's
Mm-hmm.
the West moving closer into Russia, right? Like getting more ground, because then they're going to be talking about, man, I could be wrong, but I don't know if it was like Bolivia or something like that. There's a couple other countries. I don't remember. Georgia was one of them, I believe. They're talking about possibly joining, or no, Georgia did join, I think. It was talking about NATO. But like the more countries that we get closer to Russia, and obviously Russia stands still and can't get back like their Soviet Union, so called, that he wants so bad. What do you think is going to kind of be like the
Right.
end result? Like, what do you think? Do you think Putin's just going to do the whole like I'm going to hit the red button and kill 1/3 of the world, or what do you think could possibly happen if we keep kind of progressing and then showing like that standstill that like, hey, here's where we're at. You can't progress anymore, and then this is the wall.
Here's what I think, honestly. I don't think Russia, Putin, ultimately is going to hit the red button, like you said, and then end up vaporizing, a bunch of people. Okay. I think that, as we've talked about in another episode, deterrence looks like, and deterrence is strength, and it's exhibition of strength, it's exhibition of resolute unity between all the countries in NATO standing up and having a forward mission and moving in the same direction, and all of that would be against Russian aggression, right? So, um, I get what you're saying completely, and I think you're right, because this is a concern for a lot of people, a lot of diplomats, a lot of politicians, that we keep inching closer and closer and closer, near Russia, right? So, let's be honest, right? China has influence in Mexico. We don't like that. It's on our border. The same way Russia naturally has the tendency to feel the same way. Of course they would. Okay.
Mhm.
Um, do I think it's going to elicit an even more egregious and belligerent response from Russia? I think they will do something else militarily, or try to, through an intermediary like Belarus. Um, but I just don't think they have the ability and the capability. They may have the intent, but they don't have the ability and the capability to do anything else. Like you said, constantly exposed. When those missiles went into their country, nothing
Yeah.
tracked and shot them down, right?
Yeah.
So clearly they don't have the will of their people. They don't have the technology, they don't have the supplies, they don't have the training to
Mhm.
to do this. And there's not even American or NATO troops on the ground. You're talking about the Ukrainians who have rallied to their country being invaded with support from the West, going in there and essentially getting into this massive stalemate with Russia.
Yeah.
And, you know, eventually it has to come to an end. How it comes to an end, I don't know,
Peace
because
deal.
making making predictions like that
Yeah.
is pretty rough. But ultimately, the worst thing that could happen for the United States and NATO would be for China to broker some sort of peace and get Zelensky and Russia to agree on something. Because what that would ultimately do is remove NATO from the table 100%. Right? It would be one of the biggest shows of power on the global stage for China. Aside from, everything we're going to get into down the road in this conversation about BRICS, about the Belt and Road Initiative, but if they're able to broker peace in Europe, to, again, right, this is the most violence that's been seen in Europe in decades, right?
Yeah.
If they're able to broker peace from their pulpit, essentially, in Europe, that makes a lot of things go away as far as United States hegemony. More countries moving off the dollar. I mean, transactions are being done in yuan now
Right.
daily, right?
Yep.
Um, I just think it would be the ultimate power move for China, and the United States can't let that happen, no matter what. Essentially, to me, that's a life or death situation that we have to figure out.
How do we stop it? Tough question.
It is a tough question
Mhm.
because, you know, the sooner Russia can stop funneling their people and resources into Ukraine, they're going to
Mm.
start rebuilding, and they're going to start aligning more of their decisions with what the Chinese want, right? They're going to support the Belt and Road Initiative more. They're going to support BRICS more. There's going to be a lot. And let's be honest, both Russia and China, everything they do from this point forward and from further back, has been to make and will be to make the United States look weak and
Right.
stupid and clumsy, and make more prominent this notion that the United States is a superpower in decline and that our decline is inevitable. Everything they do, everything they say is going to be to exhibit that that's going on. Um, so as far as what can we do to prevent the Chinese from brokering some sort of peace between Russia and the Ukraine, um, honestly, what needs to happen is the United States needs to make that happen. I think that maybe through more NATO involvement, as I don't
Mhm.
think we want to get to the point where we're getting into a hot war with Russia. I
Mhm.
don't think people are going to let that happen. And again, this is just me speculating, right?
Yeah.
Because that is a really tough question. But if there really is that interest between Zelensky and Putin to stop fighting, okay, um, then the United States needs to be involved in that in the biggest way and box China out of that somehow. They'll be there in some capacity, in Russia's corner, so to speak. Some, the cut man, right?
Yeah.
Uh, but I mean, I don't know. What do you think?
I think what happened, and because you want to try to rely on like materials, minerals, and all sorts of like goods to be able to have people still purchase and buy things, right, with your currency. But another thing that
Hmm.
I know we wanted to talk about, do you kind of going into it, like, do you think there is any, in your opinion, negative manner from that Nord Stream pipeline bust? Like, is that one of those like key things that you think that was either we did it on purpose, or
Hmm.
Ukraine did it? And then if we did do it on purpose, do you think it was just kind of like we shot ourselves in the foot to set us up for some kind of failure? Because I mean, not to talk about the pipeline that was coming into the United States, I think from Canada, and then there was also
Yeah,
another
you're talking
one.
about the.
What's that?
Hmm. Yeah, I know what pipeline you're talking about.
Yeah, and then so that already was just, in my opinion, tremendously dumb. And then the Nord Stream
No doubt.
blows up, gets, and so I'm thinking to myself, like,
Yeah.
wow, we're really backing ourselves into a corner. And so now it comes down to, where are we going to be getting this stuff from? I think Japan is starting to buy oil from Russia still at over top dollar, whatever, on barrels of oil.
Yeah. So the issue with that is that
Mm.
the Japanese are buying Russia and got permission from the United States to buy Russian oil despite the sanctions.
Right.
Um, so that's where that's coming from. But as far as the Nord Stream pipeline, the whole who done it of it, I think we're kind of past that unless like some crazy evidence dropped to just absolutely prove that, the United States or Ukraine or, whatever did it, right? Obviously that's going
Mhm.
to be in the news. That's going to have some sort of geopolitical
Right.
weight, right? I don't think the United States did it. I know what Biden said, that if Russia did something that he would make sure, that the Nord Stream pipeline didn't happen or whatever he said, right?
Mhm.
He made some sort of like ominous statement about it. I think the United States has a lot to lose from doing something like that.
Yeah.
I think that if could you imagine, let's put it this way, what the Nord Stream pipeline supported was energy for mainland Europe. If other NATO allies and then some of our strongest allies realized the United States went in there and blew up a pipeline, potentially causing just massive issues for our allies, what would we lose from that? We'd lose a lot, right? So I don't think the United States did it. I also don't think Russia did it because ultimately they had a lot to gain from the Nord Stream pipeline. A
Mhm.
lot, almost a monopoly sort of situation where they've been making countries like Germany completely dependent on that pipeline,
Right.
right, to have energy, natural gas, right. Doesn't matter who I think did it or how it happened. There are other countries that I think had more to gain from it and potentially were trying to use it as sort of a chess move.
Mhm.
But I think that that decision, no matter where it came from, obviously is going to have second and third order effects down the road, especially when it comes to however this ends with Russia and Ukraine, because that is something that the Russians were depending on in the future to have, right? That pipeline. But that's a big deal. It really is.
It was huge. I couldn't
Either
believe
way
it.
you look at it.
Yeah, I thought it was definitely done on purpose, but this is my opinion. I mean,
Hmm.
it's just like I look at that as like the train derailments across the US, right? It's like, how all of a sudden is all these trains in across the United States with toxic chemicals leaking into water supply? How does it just some is somebody putting a stack of quarters on the tracks, and then it's just derailing? Like, I just don't understand it. It is the flavor of the month. I don't care what anybody says. And then the Keystone Pipeline
Hmm.
blows up, and I'm just like, this was like sabotage. Somebody did this
Nord
on
Stream.
purpose, or the Nord Stream. Jesus, not
Hmm.
Keystone. Thank you. And
Oh,
it's
you're
just,
good. We were
it,
talking about the Keystone though.
yeah, it's just, I don't know, man.
Dude,
People have like,
you're
oh,
right,
you're a
man. I'm right there
conspiracy
with you.
theorist, and it's not even that, man. It's just, it's so obvious, it's so blatant, and this, you could read the script. You know what I'm saying? It's just too easy.
Dude, it is, man.
Mm.
I think you hit the nail on the head with all of these happening at once.
Yeah.
I'm not of the mind that it's just coincidence. This is
Yep.
just happening. This is something that's going to happen now, right? No, I don't think so. I do think
Mhm.
it's being done on purpose, and whatever way, shape, or form you want to develop that thought in your head, if you're listening, right? I do think it's being done on purpose. Um, it's all toxic chemicals. It all has to do with United States infrastructure. It all has to do, with the water, the air we breathe. I'm with you. I cannot be convinced unless for some reason you had, irreversible evidence that it wasn't on purpose, which I don't know what that would look like. But
Sure.
I mean, this hat is made of cloth, but if you want to pretend it's tinfoil, at this point, to me, it's on purpose,
Yep.
and it's not coincidental. It happens too frequently, and it happened too frequently and too close together, in my opinion, to just be happenstance.
Yeah, and I don't know if I talked about this on the last episode or the episode 3,
Mhm.
but my buddy,
Yeah, yeah.
um, I'll say his first name, Kevin. He lives in
Hmm.
Pennsylvania, and then when
Hmm.
that train derailed in Ohio, he said he lived, I think it was like 25 miles away, and he for 2 weeks,
Wow.
everybody in his house, headaches. He was, personally, I think he was getting nosebleeds, is what he said. And then, I mean, people just felt sick. And he's 20, I think it was 25 miles away. So it's really like not that far, but, to go
No.
across and get carried into the wind, what have it. I don't know, man. I'm just not buying it. That, like I said, that's my opinion. I know that's your opinion. It's just, it's crazy because, then Biden was talking about dumping all this money into infrastructure across the U.S. and bridges and roads and,
Build back better.
yeah, yeah, exactly. The Build Back Better plan. And it's just, is it though? Is it really building it back better? Yeah. And it's just, I don't know.
Mhm.
I feel like there's just a lot of money going into politicians' pockets like they do every year. Um, but everybody knows that. So,
Yeah, dude. Just like when all this ends with the Ukraine, and obviously, to me, the U.S. right and NATO will
yeah.
eventually come out on top, unless something happens where the conflict there spills over into the rest of Europe, right?
Mhm.
Eventually, I feel like the United States will come out on top with our allies. But who's going to move into Ukraine and help them rebuild? United States. Who's going to get those contracts to go in there and set up those rebuilds? The United States. Who is going to own a bunch of those politicians, right? And the subsidiary companies that they, you know, are supporting, right? You use that word in quotations. They're going to make money that way, right? So,
Mhm.
like you said, politicians at the end of the day are always getting kickbacks and money in underhanded ways, right?
Mhm.
But your friend is 25 miles from that train derailment and that massive plume of just blacker than black smoke that was going up into the sky. It literally looked like a volcanic eruption.
It did.
Um, yeah, it did. And 25 miles is not that far when, people in Florida were picking up ash off the ground from Mount St. Helens blowing up in the state of Washington. And that's a lot further than 25 miles, right? And here's another thing, when I was deployed last, there's a burn pit, right? And everything on camp is getting burned. All the plastic, any of the dead animals that wound up, needing to dispose of, food trash, styrofoam, literally anything you can think
Uh,
of, shit paper getting burned in this massive furnace, and the smoke is just going right up into the air. So every once in a while, you just would get this like putrid stench of plastic or something, and you're breathing it in. And what do we have? We have a national registry for burn
mhm.
pits and military members, right? So to sit there and talk about you're 25 miles away, you're experiencing these headaches and all this stuff, like unfortunately him and all those other families around there, they have been infected and affected by that, you know what I mean? And there's
Mhm.
going to be a litany of people with health problems, and there currently are, but in the future this is going to have a huge effect over the next couple of decades with people and the medical care that they're going to require as they get older and cancers pop up and all this stuff. it's just a massive, it's a mess. It's a huge mess, and it's a really sad, unfortunate mess, especially when you consider just how little attention and how much, the current administration tried to downplay what was going on there. It's just really, really sad.
Yeah, you have that kind of a crisis going on, and then, where was the president? He went over to Ukraine to send more money and somewhat, I don't know how you have to physically show up to show support when you're sending over $100 billion in the time frame. But touching base back on when you said about, like, if we go over into Ukraine and get contracts and yada yada yada, how do you think, like,
Hmm.
escalation wise, with us being over there and then possibly like Poland, Belarus, with nukes essentially going into Belarus, like, how do you, what is your opinion on, like, how would Poland react, or is it just going to be like a whole NATO decision? Because Poland is in my
I
opinion, a
mean,
very strong ally too.
yeah, no doubt. Obviously, you had that reel we did about the USAG, U.S. Army Garrison, being set up there. Um, but as far as like escalation now, obviously the whole nukes thing with Belarus,
Hmm.
Poland, it just gave F-16s to Ukraine, Polish F-16s, fighter jets, right?
Hmm.
Um, that is escalation. That's aid, right? Because now the aircraft that they lost over time through this conflict are being replenished, um, potentially, better aircraft than they had before, and all of this is to fight the Russians, right? So they're going to see it as escalation. Um, was your question essentially, after this is over, are there going to be reactions from enemy nations about, maybe American companies and American interests being established in Ukraine? Yeah, definitely. There's going to be people that have issue with that because they're going to kind of use the same argument that you brought up before. And this is just, my opinion on what this would look like, but the encroaching on territory closer and closer and closer to Russia. Um, will the United States have, an army garrison in Ukraine one day? I don't know. Is it a possibility?
Hmm.
I don't know. Anything is possible, right? When you talk about the spectrum of possibility and probability. But yeah, I do think there will be speeches given. There will be a lot of public outcry. There will be world leaders that are against American foreign policy coming out and lambasting us about doing, helping the Ukrainians rebuild or whatever.
Hmm.
Um, but as far as any sort of like military escalation, no, I don't think so. But I do think that the more countries that continue to get involved in the conflict between Ukraine and Russia, the more it kind of pushes it towards that edge. You know what I mean? Because you're starting to get more and more involvement, and what's that look like? It's becoming more of a global conflict, right? So I think that that's escalation no matter what it is, whether it's monetary assistance or whether it's F-16s, right, going to Ukraine. It's all escalation because it's involvement. Does that make sense?
Yeah, because I remember Putin made an announcement, or or speech or what have it, that he said that if the US sent aircraft or tanks or whatever over into Ukraine, that he would essentially
Hmm.
attack and retaliate.
Right.
But now, like you said, there's Polish F-16s over there. So is he
Hmm.
going to continue to back up that thought process, or is he just gonna be like, oh well, it's not the US, so I'm not gonna do anything, it's a different country? But you would assume that he would still kind of pull that card, because obviously a NATO ally, because now there's tanks over in Ukraine from other countries and us as well. I just saw a video
Hmm.
today. I forgot what the tank is called, but we were sending over like light armor tanks and stuff like that. And I'll
Hmm.
have to tell you offline or remind it, but we have sent over. There's videos of them over there, and the Ukrainians driving them around. And then, so like you said, Polish, or there's Polish F-16s, and is Putin going to do anything? Is he just going to kind of let it take its course, or?
Here's the thing: like Putin had to have anticipated, obviously, that support in Ukraine was going to come,
Yep.
right? Maybe he thought it wouldn't look the way it does, and maybe he thought it wouldn't come as quickly as it did, right?
Mhm.
Um, but now that this has been going on for over a year, I think he knows full well that countries are going to keep providing assistance to Ukraine. It's no different than when we did it 3 months ago. It's no different than when we did it 6 months ago. It would be one thing if we, moved a couple of battalions of soldiers or Marines into Ukraine or something like that. You know what I mean? But the support from other countries, I mean, that's kind of the whole deterrence thing we were talking about before, is just resolutely standing up against what's going on, and instead of showing weakness through division and kind of shutting each other down as far as what we're deciding to do, having that united front is the best form of deterrence for that, in my opinion. Which is interesting when you consider too, like Macron, the French prime minister, who did he meet with? Xi
Exactly.
Jinping,
Yep.
right? Trying to discuss their joint interests, and um, to think that the European Union, right, and any other country in Europe isn't going to be affected by any sort of conflict, or whether it's economic or military conflict that comes between Europe and the United States, to you're going to be spared in some way, shape, or form. I think we've reached a point where, no, you're not going to be spared. There's going to be negative effects that are going to happen, and trying
Yeah.
to me, it almost looks like trying to kiss a little ass, right?
Oh, easy.
From somebody that, yeah. But again, it doesn't show a united front. It shows, again, that you're willing to go and do and talk to and come to a world leader who is completely and totally against anything Western, wants all of world commerce and trade, all of that centralized right there in China. But I mean, again, like, what conversations is Macron having with Xi Jinping about Belt and Road Initiative going into Europe, right? Coming out of Pakistan and going into Europe, all of that. How are they having conversations? Is he trying to pad his pockets, like you said, politicians making money? These conversations just kind of feel like pandering, and trying to play all sides of the field and not actually taking up a position. Because I feel like we're reaching that point where lines in the sand are being developed. And I mean, just let's be real. You can't have leaders from European countries going and meeting with somebody who's some autocratic dictator, responsible for massive amounts of human rights violations, and going over there and talking about joint interests. So that just, again, it looks like shit.
So let me ask you another question, because I know you touched on the Belt and Road Initiative as well. So for those that don't know, we're going to touch base, of course, on the Belt and Road Initiative, but I guess to kind of tiptoe into it, China
Mm-hmm.
is heavily involved in South America, right?
Oh yeah.
I had to write this down just so I don't forget a country per se, but they have
Mm-hmm.
consolidated positions all around South America. So they are partnered, trading partners with Chile, Peru, Brazil, um, and they are. I think they're. What does it say right here? It says as of October of 2021, China has established
Mm-hmm.
28 institutes in Southern America. And when I looked at the map,
Wow.
it is literally all the way around Southern America. Okay, so they're located, obviously, Brazil. They are what I said earlier: Peru, Colombia, Ecuador, Argentina, which is a big part of it. Gosh, I think China gave them. It was like a loan, of course, right? It was like
Mm-hmm.
13 or 14 billion, and then it jumped upwards, I think last year, to like 44 or 45 billion that China has essentially done and given them. They're also over in Bolivia. And then I said Chile, Venezuela. Um, so with the Belt and Road Initiative and what's going on over in Russia and Ukraine, do you think this is going to be like another worse? NATO is so distracted on this, and then China is going to kind of come up back and around and kind of swoop around and come up underneath us? Like, what is your
So
your
here's
thought
the.
process?
Mm-hmm. So I'll give you my answer. Then I want to go back to, you said institutes. I'm curious what that means, right? But to answer your question first, uh, China has been working in silence for a long time. Okay.
Very.
The Belt and Road Initiative has been coming along quietly without the notoriety of the media for a very long time. I think that COVID very much exposed a lot of what was going on there. It's now started to become more prominent in the media. People, you can say more commonly now to somebody Belt and Road Initiative, and they know
Mhm.
what you're talking about. Okay. It's, by land and by sea, these trade routes that all go back to China, centralized, so they never have to worry about where stuff is coming from again. Okay. And they control the influx and output of all of this stuff. 100% it's going to keep happening,
Yeah.
right? Is the world going to pay attention a little bit more now? Yes. They are paying a little bit more attention now, but is it going to deter the Chinese from doing what they're doing? In no way, shape, or form. Aside from gaining economic prominence, aside from these actions looking like they are, and not just looking like, right? And they are becoming a superpower, controlling more of what happens around the world, helping countries make decisions, making decisions. All of that just knocks and chips away at the power that the United States has around the world, right? So there's goals on multiple fronts, right? Economic, ideologically, because it makes the United
Yep.
States look weak. Of course, they're going to keep doing this. It only helps them out to keep doing this. So,
Right.
but what did you mean by institutions?
So this is off the Foreign Affairs Committee. So
Okay.
I'll just try to kind of cliff note this a little bit because
United States
there's
Foreign Affairs Committee?
this one is yeah, this one is off the foreignaffairs.house.gov. So this one,
Okay.
just to kind of, like I said, cliff note a little bit. As of May of last year, 2022, 7 countries in Southern America participate in the PRC's Belt and Road Initiative, right? BRI. So
Mhm.
obviously those countries I touch base on in case people forget, it's Venezuela, Ecuador, Peru, Bolivia, Chile, Argentina, Uruguay. As of 2021, those institutes that are over in South America are going to be your energy accounts, they are going to be infrastructure, they are mining, there are
Mhm.
Chinese state-owned banks and companies. There's
Mhm.
also Chinese railways out there in construction, and then
Right.
obviously around the shore, this next part right here is National Offshore Oil, also known as CNOOC, which is
Hmm.
yeah, China National Offshore Oil Company, right? And this right here, I'm not going to add it up 'cause I just can't do it that quickly, but from 2021 until 2022, there is, let's do quick math. They've invested over 34% in some areas and 42% in some areas in Southern America. You're looking close to about $150 billion that they had just funded into Southern America. And when I looked at the map, it is insane and it is scary to me that they have gained so much ground and they're at the Belt and Road Initiative, like we know, but I'll just kind of touch base for everybody out there. There's 195 countries.
Please.
Out of those 195 countries, 151 of them are owned by China essentially because they give these countries loans and like, hey, we'll build back your third world country. We'll give you infrastructure, this and that, but we'll put you on like a 99-year loan or a 500-year loan, knowing you can't pay us back. And then what happens with that? Just like a bank, and they come get your house. China now owns all that shit. It is, all those institutes and mining and oil production and energy, they're all over the place. And it's, I don't know, man. I guess I haven't thought about it too deep about it, but I mean, my brain can't even really. It's probably too much to process, but man, that is a lot of ground to cover in the world that I feel we are so far behind on.
100% we're far behind on that. And let's kind of flesh out what that means a little bit, right, from our perspective.
Mm.
Um, China does business with a lot of these countries that are up and coming. And when I say up and coming, I'm being nice, right? A lot of them that don't have the infrastructure, don't have the people to pull themselves up out of poverty or whatever. And they welcome the Chinese coming in. And majority of these regimes that run these countries are just like China in that they are dictatorships. They don't take care of their people, right? But
Mhm.
they welcome all this Chinese money because, like you said, the Chinese say, "Hey, in exchange for us coming in and building these railroads and hospitals and schools to help out your infrastructure, in essence, helping this country gain something from it, you have 12 lithium mines in your country, and we want either the all of the profit from that lithium that you're mining and selling, or a portion of the profit, or we want the raw material that you're gleaning from this mine," right? To keep with
Yeah.
that example. And like you said, gaining ground, all those countries in South America, they're on our side of the world, and I mean that like hemisphere wise. Okay, they're to the south of us. um these are all countries that the United States has not done business with, because we at the time could choose not to do business with them, because we basically were trying to say, hey, you have these issues going on, you need to be more democratic, you need to be better to your people, and
Mhm.
didn't do business with them. And now the Chinese have no problem doing business with them, because right, there's money involved,
Yeah.
there's manipulation and control. Who are they trying to knock off the top? It's the United States. It helps them in that, right? They're there on our side of the world. They're taking up all these natural resources, and they're, quote unquote, assisting these countries. And when the time comes to, calling those favors on these bases or institutes or whatever you want to call them, banks, all this stuff, they're going to, and it only serves to or exists to serve Chinese interests ultimately, right? And sure, at the end of the day, if they develop these countries enough and they eventually take over, become the hegemon of the world, and they have more developed countries that can produce resources for them, of course that benefits China, benefits everybody in some way, shape, or form when you look at how economics works. But it doesn't benefit United States rule, essentially, right? um
Mhm.
so we've lost a lot of ground, not just in the South, not just in South America, Central Asia, the Indo-Pacific. All of these places are now becoming spheres of influence for the Chinese, and some of these places were opportunities and missed opportunities for the United States to establish spheres of influence.
Yeah.
Were United States spheres of influence? Like look at the situation that's going on with Iran and Saudi Arabia now. You know,
Yeah.
these are areas, especially Saudi Arabia, where the United States had a lot of influence and losing ground, right?
Yeah. So kind of going back to like touching base on South America, right? Like, so China's got this
Mhm.
massive influence, like you were saying. They're touching all over the place. And then now looking at it as I'm talking to you to make the situation even worse of, a superpower like China. Now we've got these spy balloons coming over the United States. And, you know, I, man, I'm trying to keep it toned down for a second, but you can't tell me that this spy balloon leaves China, comes over, hits a wind gust, comes into Alaska, across Canada, down over one of our bases that everybody knows
Malmstrom Air
about.
Force Base.
Yes.
Hmm.
And then it goes across the continental United States for 7 days, and you're going to tell me it's a weather balloon?
Yeah, no, of course. The Chinese official party line, right? And then come out and condemn us when we shoot it down over the Atlantic, right, off the
Hmm.
coast of, I think, what, North Carolina, right?
Hmm.
And yeah, no, of course, that whole thing was just a massive debacle. It should have never made it to the United States. Should have never made it to the point where it was crossing over our country. That whole line about they're afraid of shooting it down and where it may land. I'm
Crap.
sorry. It was over some of the least populated country in our
Yeah.
United States. There are like more cows in Montana than there are people, and you can't tell me that shooting this thing out of the sky,
Yeah.
the probability of it hitting somebody, you just make sure, right? Let's do the math. Where's this thing gonna fall? Make sure it doesn't hit anybody, right?
Yeah.
Clear that space out and watch it hit the ground, right?
Yeah.
Um, that's it's such a BS excuse. But the problem with that too, man, is what information did that collect? Because obviously the United States was probably trying to jam that the whole time. And I know we've come out and said that we were jamming it, but
Hmm.
first off, jamming doesn't work every single time. What information did it collect? What information did it send back to the
Real
Chinese?
time
What
too.
information, real time? And when you're talking about a satellite,
Mm.
okay, and this is a satellite attached to a balloon, okay, the dwell time that this satellite had over the top of American assets is a lot more than it would have had if it was up, in a low Earth orbit, right?
Right.
Because it's moving a lot faster up there as opposed to being attached to something that's just floating and essentially at the whim of the small, motors that are on this thing. Not to mention it is powered by solar panels. So the intention completely was to be powered nonstop, not have to rely on any sort of internal battery to operate and worry about it running out of battery life or whatever. So I just, to me, is like, what a total debacle, what a total shame. I can't believe that we were able to look up in our sky and see a Chinese spy balloon, and not just one.
Yeah, it
How
was
many
4,
others,
right?
that we shot, right? Yeah, and then one of them was like an actual balloon that belonged to like was it, I don't remember what university it was that it belonged
Oh,
to,
Michigan,
that
I
it
think,
got shot down.
maybe?
Was it Michigan?
I think it
Whatever. It
possibly.
was
Yeah.
it was a balloon owned by a university for kids actually doing some sort of experiment.
Yeah.
But um anyway, and if you notice too, they stopped calling them Chinese spy balloons after the first one got shot down. Um yeah.
Yeah, it's, and the fact that, like, we said earlier, it went across the United States for 7 days, like, holy cow, 24/7, or yeah, 24/7 of,
Nonstop.
yeah, just gaining all this intel, sending it back real time. It's being remote controlled is what they said. Um, and it's just, I don't know, man. It's just, it puts a lot of worry. And I don't care if someone's political views are left or right or center. You need to make a decision on that as an administration and as a president to protect essentially our sovereign land. Like, you need to make a decision quick. That is an enemy. It is a big enemy, and just to let it take its course because um they were, like you said earlier, they were afraid it was going to fall and it's too dangerous. But then, of course, when it leaves the United States, okay, cool, now we'll take it down. So
Right. I can think of a lot of other presidents that would have just shot it down long before it even got to Montana.
yeah,
Just
buddy.
saying. Let your
um
mind wander with that, how it will. But I can think of some other presidents that wouldn't have let it do what it did.
yeah.
Just saying.
So that was the spy balloon. So let's get your take on bricks, because I don't know if we touched base on that yet.
No, we didn't. We were talking about our northern border. I was going to hit on our southern border real fast.
Yeah, yeah, of
Um,
course.
Dude, let's talk about the fentanyl crisis going
Oh
on in our
shit.
country. Okay, who's enabling the fentanyl crisis in our country, Chris?
I want to say China, Mexico,
Dude,
China.
congratulations. Dude, you have won. You've won the grand prize. Yeah, dude, absolutely. The Chinese.
Yeah,
Who's teaching the cartels to make this stuff and
China.
pushing it into our country?
Yep.
China. Yeah. And this is something that doesn't get any attention either.
Zero.
It's an insane crisis, dude. We can't even do, at least our unit can't even do infield drug tests anymore because of fentanyl if we needed to, right?
Yep.
Because just being around it and being exposed to it can kill you, right? It's extremely dangerous. It's extremely addictive, and it is the number one drug in our country, coming into our country, and it's destroying a lot of people's lives. And we've talked about, again, like all these efforts the Chinese make on all these different fronts to bring the United States down. Dude, they have hit literally every front you can think of when it comes to attacking us from all sides. What better way, to do that than pumping drugs into a country that, again, has basically seemingly open borders down there,
Falling
right?
apart.
And lawlessness that lets it happen, the
Mhm.
the massive criminal elements that that perpetrate this stuff, all these cartels that are now pushing their way up into the United States, there's now cartel crime that happens in these border states, New Mexico, Arizona, California. We now have crime that is linked back to cartels. So it's just crazy, man. And I don't feel like you said, our sovereign land is protected by the politicians that are in charge of it. So
It makes me see more of like how politicians are bought off because it is such a huge crisis that nobody wants to go there. No one they just leave it
they
alone.
don't.
They're taking trips overseas to go to Ukraine and do all this other bullshit. And it's like you have
Yeah.
this coming in these states and across these borders, but you don't want to take one visit and you've been in the presidency for 3 years. I just don't understand how you can't
Hmm.
do that. Screw your little ice cream breaks. Go down there and show face, do what you're supposed to do, show
You're
people that
killing me.
show
Hmm.
people that you are taking the initiative, and it's just I don't know, man. It's just it's so
That's
just
not. It's not
idiotic.
leadership. I'll say that.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not. It's not. It is
No.
idiotic. It's not leadership.
Yeah.
Um. I. It just. It's sad, and it's really frustrating for people who care. And to me, the reason why it doesn't get any sort of attention is because it would all be negative attention. And there's going to be negative attention no matter what, man. There's going to be
Mhm.
things that happen that aren't things you want to happen when you're in a leadership position, whether you're leading at work in a small level or you're leading a country. There's going to be things that happen that are negative. Own them, do something about them. That speaks a lot more than the very blatantly obvious way that you're trying to ignore and pretend like something negative isn't happening.
Yeah.
So people kind of hoping that people forget about what is happening. So yeah, man.
It's just like the
It's a freaking
news.
shame.
Yeah, it's just like the news. Like
Mhm.
you turn on the TV and what is like the number one thing people are drawn to? Negativity. Like, oh, this is bad. This is going on. Like, people it's always like
Mhm.
you don't really hear anything positive, right? You hear people getting shot, stabbed, kids getting shot at schools by transgenders, another topic. It's just like
Oh yeah.
it's and then like you said, like own it, take initiative, turn these people around, make them believe in you, that you're actually doing something, for a good cause. But I mean, yeah.
Well, dude, that kind of stuff is what got us into this mess. It's the both sides of the aisle
Mm.
unwilling to work with one another to
Yeah.
solve problems. There have been other presidencies that have tried to focus on what's going on in the Asian side of the world, and we haven't because the opposite side wants to basically cares more about their party line and the bottom line of what their party has to say. So they just disagree with something, and nothing happens, dude. And here's the thing, too, man. Chinese children learn about what happens in American politics at school.
Mhm.
And what they learn about, and of course it's through the lens of the CCP, and it's propagandized, and but oh, the Xi Jinping and the CCP, Mao Zedong, all these past leaders, they're amazing, and what the United States and the West is going on is bad. But what they do talk about, and what is kind of right on the nose, is nothing gets done in American politics because we have a two-party system now, and all
Right.
they do is go head to head against each other. They don't reach across the aisle enough to come up with actionable solutions to fix problems. They care
Mhm.
more about arguing and then boosting up whatever their party feels is important at the time, and nothing gets done. And that's what they're taught, is essentially this Western form of government is a failure and has caused all of this decline in their society and in their culture, because they can't, and democracy, right, is just a failure. And we have and they talk about how they have a system that has this divine leader, and they make decisions that are good for the people, and obviously the rest is just all propagandized
Yeah.
crap. But it's not wrong to say that the failure of our politicians to be bipartisans and come together and solve problems, that's 100% the truth.
Yeah, and how you said that they're teaching kids in school. I saw a video, I think it was yesterday. This is all public
Mhm.
source social media. There's little Russian girls in school learning how to put weapons together, how to take them apart, how to clean them, and how to
Oh
shoot them.
yeah,
I was like,
yeah,
"Geez, man, that
yeah.
like imagine if that was over here. Holy, what shitstorm that would be for all these, Second Amendment people that are trying to take that away." But um,
Hmm.
let's talk about the bricks,
For
and
sure,
kind of
dude.
and go from there to, let people know why this is a big deal.
Hmm. Right. So BRICS is an alliance essentially of countries being led by China. It's an economic, it's a commercial alliance. I'm sure, at some point it'll have some sort of military element to it. Although if you go and look up BRICS, and it has websites, it has information it pushes out. It doesn't mention anything about that. It gives you a bunch of tropes about peace and commerce around the world. But BRICS is Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. That's what BRICS stands for, BRICS. And the ultimate goal is to replace what the United States has done with its allies around the world, creating a multipolar world, with essentially this alliance, this BRICS alliance, being the leader, right? Um, Having its own currency, doing its transactions commercially in its own currency, that have nothing to do with the United States. Could you imagine having, if there were competing currencies like that? There already, I mean, obviously we have competing currencies because
Mhm.
that's one of the reasons why the EU came up with the euro, right? Was to
Right.
try and help and balance things out. But if you had these world powers, doing transactions in one currency and another, both of these trying to be the top currency again because the United States, the US's petrodollar has fallen off so much, right?
Yeah.
Like all the problems and the shitstorm that would cause. But BRICS is essentially a response led by the Chinese to have more economic prominence and establish inroads for the Chinese and its allies, to combat what current system is established around the world. So
Yeah, it's
that
a
that is my summarization of what goes on. If you want to learn more, definitely go look it up.
yeah, and it's I kind of look at it like what they came up with. I'm like, wow, like another like
Hmm.
genius tactic to combat
Genius.
and attack the US
You
dollar.
nailed it.
And
Hmm.
I'm just like, man, like China moves slow, but that when they come out with these points, they hit it pretty hard and very strategically, in my opinion.
Super calculated.
Yeah, and it's and that's essentially what they're good at. And, like we touched base earlier, the BRI, they financially, economically, whatever, own 151 countries out of 195. Like that is very, very strategic. Granted, we were busy with GWAT, and that's 20 years of them being able to really snoop in and go around and stay under the radar, per se, if you will.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's I think that bricks thing is definitely something that shouldn't be taken lightly.
So no, and not enough
Mm.
people know about it. And
None.
kind of what you said is no, dude. I go. I've been at work, talking about this stuff, and people are like, "What are you talking about?"
Hmm.
It's like,
They're in the military.
if they're in the military, right? This is, how do you not know, right? There's so much more that our phones show us that's trying to distract us than things like this. But what you said is perfect about how the United States is distracted. 20-year war in the Middle East.
Hmm.
Meanwhile, China's grinding on the side, coming up with the blueprint to essentially counter every single thing the United States does. Because the United States, is very open about what we do. We don't try to sit in the dark on everything. We have, very covert things we do as well.
Yeah.
But a lot of what we do is overt, right? And just sitting there building the blueprint on what they can do to counteract everything the United States does and will do and wants to do, and they certainly are doing that right now. But my question is to you, man. I would love to hear your opinion on: is this just the natural march of civilizations? Is just, eventually one will replace the other? I mean, this is there's all kinds of examples from this from history of cultures replacing one another and building off the top of them and kind of picking up where that old culture left off. Is this another transition like that where the United States' hegemony is going to be replaced essentially, and the Chinese will just pick up and become that power? I mean, is this just a natural progression of things, or how we just become too distracted and can fix the problem? What do you think?
Very good question, loaded question. I like it. So first off and foremost, I am freaking USA all the way, right? Um, it's uh, it's a
100%.
it's a scary thought of where we're at and where things could go. And I'm a firm believer in like essentially history repeats itself, right? Just like how you were kind of saying in the sense of
Right.
like one takes over the hegemon kind of deal. It's I'd be lying if I said that I'm kinda, like, losing, like, a little bit of faith as the months go on as to, like, what's our plan? Like, what are we gonna do? What's this administration currently gonna
Doesn't
do?
seem like we have one, does
E
it?
exactly, and so, it's making me think too, and I've been talking with the wife, and I've mentioned to you before, offline that,
Hmm.
you know, um, what's our backup plan? You don't wanna just sit there and get hit in the face and take all these punches, you gotta have a plan. And it's just, it's a scary thought, man. It really is. I'm not, I know I kind of keep touching base on that, but with the way,
You're right, though.
yeah, yeah, the way China's moving, um, and just how strategic they are and how smart their moves are, and like you said, calculated. Um, I really, man, I just really feel that they are gonna they're gonna kind of catch up and possibly jump ahead in this race. Because then then we can touch base on like artificial intelligence. Like that's another huge race as well that people are trying to go to.
Dude.
Um,
Yeah, and they are ahead of the United States in a lot of these
Mhm.
technologies like
Yeah.
artificial intelligence, quantum computers, hypersonic missiles, all this stuff,
Yep.
that they are ahead of the times on us because they didn't waste their time pumping money into things that didn't support exactly what their goals were. And they spent all that time and money that they had putting it into technology and coming up these new ideas and advancements, all this stuff, man. And you said, are they going to catch up? Like, they are behind in certain things,
Yep.
right? Mostly militarily.
Yep.
And I feel like we'll get more into that eventually. But what you said is, I'm going to second what you said, that it's USA all day, right? Um, but I think the question needs to genuinely be asked of what the world would look like without the United States being the sole superpower, and what that means for your kids, right? What
Yeah.
that means for the rest of the
It's
world.
a plethora.
Because let's be honest with you, man. Like, as I feel like our first off, our parents never had to worry about this. Okay, their parents, our grandparents especially, had to worry or wonder about this at all. The
Mhm.
possibility exists that that could happen, and as scary and as shitty as that is, and as much as I know all of us would go down swinging. Not saying we're going to go down, not trying to sound defeatist by any means, right? But I'm just saying that economically that could happen. You know what I mean? And it's not smart to not ask that question.
Yep.
Not to say, again, right, do I think that we can turn things around and start fixing problems and start gaining ground again, like you said? Yeah, I 100% think we can, and we should, right? And I think the ability is there. I think the American people need to realize that the lifestyle they've enjoyed the past several decades, okay, could go away very, very, very quickly. Okay. If that doesn't light a fire under your ass, that you're not going to be able to go to Starbucks or Target and get shit because the supply lines are cut off, to our country, or whatever else happens, like your lifestyle you're not gonna be able to enjoy. I don't know what will, right? Think about what the world would look like for your children, that kind of thing. These are real questions that need to be asked, and our government needs to start moving at a faster rate to counteract those things.
Even like you said, like the supply chain, something is like minuscule as freaking eggs, dude. there are times where I've got both my kids here, and the last thing I wanna do is load them up, go to a grocery store. I've got one arm that works, my other arm is completely
Gimp.
shot, right? Yeah, and so I don't wanna sit there and worry about taking them in the store, maintaining my 3-year-old, which, obviously he's a great kid, but, um, I get
He's three.
things. Yeah, I get things delivered to the house, right? Instacart. Technology is a genius and a
Hmm.
great thing, but something as small as
Yeah.
eggs, we order them weekly and they're out of eggs. And like I went physically into the store to get chicken breasts. All they had was freaking drums and chicken thighs. That was it. Those are two things that I really don't eat chicken wise. So I'm like, well, I'm just going to get chicken
Hmm.
thighs, a little bit more fat. It's tasty, but the supply chain, wholly terrifying. How would that be? Just like you said, trying to go into a grocery store and maintain the things that you get on a daily basis. And now you're trying to limit paper towels and toilet paper to, 1 to 2 to a family and whatever the case may be.
Dude.
And it's
It,
awful. It really is. And I'm
it,
not to cut you off, man. Sorry.
no, you're good,
It's
bro.
uh
Absolutely.
it's just one of those things like how you were saying earlier, like people are fed this good life and this administration right now, um, I hate to say like, oh, this is just my opinion because we're just talking and this is the reason of this podcast. But if you keep trying to please every single person and every worry that somebody has, then they're going to be
Yes.
fed this BS lifestyle. And then those people that are not mentally and physically prepared because they're worried about trying to raise their rainbow flag or their transgender flag in a school, all of a sudden one day that gets taken away. And then now you have this bigger problem going on around the world. And then, like you said, that one day gets taken away. And now your lifestyle is completely different, is completely changed, and the world is not the same as we know it.
Dude, we Americans especially are very, very used to our creature comforts. Okay. Like you said, Instacart, Netflix, anything you can think of that you do on a daily basis that you don't even think about. You hit the button on your remote and you've got Netflix or Hulu
Mhm.
or HBO Plus or whatever you've got going on at home. The food you can go get at the grocery store, all of that could change very, very quickly. And the chaos that that would cause if that stopped, okay? Even if it trickled to a stop, not just like instantaneously stopped.
Mhm.
The loose social contract that we have as human beings only exists as long as the food and water last.
Yep.
After that, it's Mad Max. And that's a
100%
fact
survival of the
because those are
fittest.
the two most basic things, yeah, that we need to survive. Now, and there's going to be people that'll get used to the fact that, well, I have to ration what I'm eating, or I have to now figure out how to hunt to live to take care of my family, right?
Yeah.
But like I said, man, shit's gonna get weird really fast. And like I said, when the food and the water run out, that's when you're gonna really see the real side of your neighbors.
Yeah, it's gonna implode and it's gonna be a human Armageddon going on. So let's touch base here on let's do a little bit on the artificial intelligence aspect of it. You know, that is also, in my opinion, kind of scary. I don't trust it.
Mm-hmm.
I guess this
Hmm.
might fall underneath it as well. Is that what did it? McDonald's recently announced that they are having a meeting or whatever, and they're firing and laying off a bunch of people. I think it was McDonald's. Man, I'm probably wrong. I hope not,
Mm-hmm.
but they're laying off a bunch of
Hmm.
people, and then in the picture they have literally a bunch of those little kiosks set up now to where they're not going to have anybody take your order. You just freaking do 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 do, and it makes your food. So just the
Yeah.
artificial AI takeover. And, and this makes me think back to the movie with Bruce Willis, The Fifth Element. When I first saw
Okay.
that, I was like, man, the world one day we're gonna have the flying cars, we're gonna get all this crazy technology and shooting plasma guns and whatever happened in that movie. I'm just like, I see that and I think of like where the world wants to go and progress and this AI stuff getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Um,
Hmm.
it's are you kind of scared about it? Are you worried? Do you trust it? Do you like it? What are your opinions on that?
Right. So, I think artificial intelligence is an inevitable thing
Yep.
now, right? We all have at least tried ChatGPT at some point. Okay. I mean, I
I've
know
never tried
somebody
it,
at
man.
work who, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I'm sure you know. So I know you know somebody who's tried it because I've tried it,
Yeah.
right? So,
Yep. There you
and
go.
I work with somebody who's used it to write, things for them for work, right?
Wow.
And there are people that, yeah, and they're even developing ways for computers and programs that are supposed to detect cheating, to recognize that something that's being turned in was written by an AI, right? So it's going to be around for a while if you're trying to figure that out. But um, when I was stationed overseas in Germany, a lot of the McDonald's that I just go, if this was indeed McDonald's you were talking about, a lot of the McDonald's that I would go to in Germany, aside from the fact that German McDonald's just dunks on American McDonald's, if you've ever been to an international McDonald's, but almost all of the ordering was done at a kiosk,
Yep.
right? um, the counters were for people who were wanting to pay cash, right? And then to hand you your food. And everybody in the back is the one just working on your food and not actually standing there taking your order, right?
Mhm.
So that's something, maybe McDonald's was trying out overseas before, really getting. I haven't been, dude, honestly, can't even tell you the last time I walked into a McDonald's since I've been back in the United States to know if they have auto kiosks for ordering. But, I mean, I don't know. You look like you have.
Yeah, because you were saying that too. Sorry, I was thinking about when wife and I went to Italy. They had the kiosk. That was in 2019 over at those McDonald's. But
Hmm.
it is McDonald's. I pulled it up over here.
Yeah.
I did the Jamie.
Tell
They
me
are
about it.
yeah. So they're laying off corporate employees after shutting offices
Okay.
temporarily. So it says
Mm.
the fast food mega chain stock was up 0.9% and is overall up nearly 7% this year. And they said that they are facing hurdles for the near future. The layoffs were announced earlier this year in another blow to white collar workers who are bearing the brunt for job cuts. Um,
Mm.
so when
Well, I mean,
like
for
it's
sure that
mhm.
for sure automation is going to take over a bunch of jobs it already has. I
Yep.
mean, you look at not just McDonald's kiosks, but look at assembly lines making cars and stuff like that.
Oh
Like
yeah.
robots do a lot of that. Look
Yep.
at Amazon warehouses. Like they have these little robots that move along the floor and they move boxes from one place to another, and they know where they're supposed to go because they have QR codes on the floor, and it scans QR code and it says you need to go left right here, and it goes left. It's awesome,
It is.
honestly,
I agree.
right? It's pretty legit. But though this all automation, it's going to take over, and it has replaced a lot of the hands-on human there doing it. But artificial intelligence wise, there's a lot more application for artificial intelligence than just McDonald's kiosks and moving your
Mhm.
boxes from Amazon around the floor. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's not even like the level of AI that we're talking about, really, right? And Xi Jinping said that the first country to master AI essentially will be the one who gets to dictate what happens in the future and be the one
Oh,
that
yeah,
comes
that's
out on
right.
top.
I remember you
And
saying that.
mhm. and he's right, because AI can think a lot faster than a human being can.
Mhm.
Okay. And if you've got an artificial intelligence that is scanning the sky for incoming missiles and is and picking out what it's going to shoot down, and doing the math a lot quicker than a person could, like obviously, so that sort of technology already exists, right? If you've ever been deployed, you know what a CRAM is.
Oh, yeah. Those
It's
are
tracking and shooting down mortars, in the air, right? It's just this little R2D2 looking
those
thing
things are
that just
badass, bro.
shoots this thing. Yeah, exactly. But it can do things exponentially faster than a human being can. The
Mhm.
application for artificial intelligence is so much more than anything we can even think of right now, right? Artificial, like we were talking the other day about the F-16s that the Air Force is putting artificial intelligence in,
Yeah.
and in using AI as like wingmen, right, inside with a pilot where it can take over if it needs to.
Mhm.
Um, And you also saw that they had F-16 pilots dogfight with F-16s that are being powered by artificial intelligence, and AI has won, right? In those some of those dogfights.
Wow.
Yeah, that's nuts when you think about it. And that's a feel good, right? Like, oh yeah, the United
Sure,
States
yeah.
has an AI that can defeat its own pilots, but that's
Mm.
not to say that the Chinese can't develop the same sort of thing, and if they haven't already, you know what I mean?
Right.
And but do I think AI is going to play a role in the future? Yes. Do I think it will play a role in future conflict? Yes. I have no idea how much of a role it will play, or even what sort of application artificial intelligence will have, but it 100% will be there. It already is. And it'll honestly be kind of like an arms race, so to speak. I mean, it already is in some ways, but who can develop AI not just the fastest, but apply it in ways that matter the most? You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's like you said, it's inevitable. And again, I'd be lying if I said this, but it's kind of cool to see like where this technology is going and where it's advancing and what they're coming out with and what it can and can't
Mhm.
do. It's
Right.
cool. Don't get me wrong. I like to be
Yeah.
able to hook my whole house up in Bluetooth, like, hey, lights on, lights off, like,
Smartphone,
yeah,
smart
exactly.
homes.
Do all sorts of stuff like
Hmm.
that. It is very cool. And it's coming out in my opinion, like at the right sequences just to get used to it and get to learn it and then progress with it. Um, let's
Hmm. It's a natural it's a natural thing, right?
yeah.
Humans are people that get very comfortable very easily. Like I said, our creature comforts, and this sort of a fear of technology is not new to artificial intelligence. People
Right.
didn't like the idea of cars. People didn't like the idea of television. I mean, you can go back and find news articles about how TV was going to fail because no one wants to sit in a room and watch TV all day, right? When now literally that people do that all day now, you know what I mean? Like, so
Yeah.
how the fear of technology, is natural. It's something that's going to continue to happen, as technology advances, and especially when you consider how quickly technology advances. I
Mhm.
mean, 10 years ago, or not even dude, like when I first got into college, like was when we first started having like touchscreen phones. And now think
Oh,
about
wow.
how far those phones have come, in that
Yeah.
short period of time, right? Not even 5 years later, you've got, touchscreen phones that, are now not just a phone, but something that you can watch all these videos on, and you can listen to all your music. Like, when was the last time you saw an iPod? You haven't, because your phone is your iPod, right? So
Yeah.
it's just like the confluence of all these technologies coming together, being easier to consolidate those technologies into more efficient technology. So I mean, there's always going to be trepidation about technology and all of that, but AI 100% is going to play a role in the future. And it's just one of the other ways that the Chinese are ahead of the United States and plotting, to kind of take over and use it as a tool to take over. And who knows, man? It probably has some sort of application for them, and will have application for them in their Belt and Road Initiative.
Yeah.
You might, could see them
Huge.
using it as a way to try to predict things that'll happen. People use artificial intelligence to try and predict things. What are they gonna have? Punch in all this information, and you get some sort of output that is a calculated decision that can take into account a lot of other things more than our human brains would be able to, and come up with an answer. So as and like ChatGPT, right? The thing that's out right now is not even the most advanced form of that artificial intelligence, and it
Oh, yeah.
already is just it's the creators are like, hey, we need to take a 6 month break from this because it's learning too fast. And I recently saw something where there's an artificial intelligence that they tried to get to like buy something, and in order to buy it, the artificial intelligence had to, when you go to spend money, like you use your debit card online,
Mhm.
and it asks you, it gives you like that, like six or like
Yep.
nine
Yep. Yep.
squares of like images, like pick which one of these has bridges in it, right? It's the captcha, right? It went online and was trying to find somebody to go and basically do it for it, to bypass this process, to say I'm not a robot. Okay.
Whoa.
This artificial intelligence was doing it on its own, was asking people to go and do this for it. Like it came up, with messages and contacted people and was like, hey, hi, yes, I'm, whatever artificial intelligence. And can you go do this for me? And can you hit the capture for me? Can you tell what is a roller skate? I need to know which boxes of these have roller skates in them or whatever. So that's crazy, man. But the Chinese will use everything they can to get a leg up. But
Yeah,
artificial intelligence, very very interesting.
it's very real, very interesting. And then I just want to throw
Hmm.
out like kind of like a little fun fact before kind of want to touch base back on something. When we
Hmm.
went to Iceland in 2018, I don't know if I told you this, but over at
Hmm.
the gym there in Reykjavik, it's called World Gym, and
Hmm.
one of the employee rooms. I think it was like a personal trainer room. I'm not 100% sure, but in order to get in there in 2018, I don't know when they had it implemented, but you go up to the wall and it's got this almost like a what's the size of like your like an outlet, like a GCI outlet that you have that you plug just a normal thing into. They
Hmm.
had this thing and it's got a plastic cover where you would like if you ever been to like 24-hour fitness, you put your finger down, you sign in that way sometimes. Well, you go up to this little square thing on the wall and you just go like this and it scans your eye.
Oh, retinal scan.
And that's in yeah, exactly. And that's how you get into that room instead of like a card or a key. You just go up there, boom, retinal scan, and you're in. And I saw that and I was like, whoa.
Right. Yeah, that's
So
pretty wild, man.
yeah.
Yeah, I understand people's concern and being weirded out about stuff like that, but I
Sure.
mean, it's kind of just one of those things. It's gonna happen.
Yeah. Let's touch base on, I want to hear your thoughts about these politicians, possibly being bought off and the Mitch
Mm.
McConnell with the whole Russia thing. What's your opinion on that?
Um, well, first off, obviously, yes, there are a ton of U.S. politicians that
Yeah.
have interests in China.
Hmm.
Mitch McConnell is one of them, obviously. I know there's a lot of open source information to include some books written about U.S. politicians that are in the pockets of the Chinese government, and Mitch McConnell is one of them. He's also one of the more prominent ones because, as you know, he was the head of the Republican Party for a long time,
Yep.
but he made a lot of money in Chinese shipping. And he's somebody. He was one of the first U.S. politicians to go over to China, which when it was still very, I mean, it still is. It would be way more taboo now, but it was very taboo back then,
Mhm.
about opening the market to China and going and talking to them. But and he has those ties through marriage, right? But when you think about the fact that somebody like Mitch McConnell, the amount of power that he has, the decisions that he's a part of, the decisions that he makes, um, in essence, you think about all the inaction that happens in our politics. It kind of makes you wonder where some of that is coming from when it
Yep.
doesn't serve the interests of the American people. Okay, and I get that a lot of what you can go find out about people is um, uh, incidental evidence. It's not hard evidence essentially to
Hmm.
say that somebody is making decisions against U.S. interests, but it
Hmm.
definitely makes that go off in the back of your head that that's happening. And I mean, you bring this up, like, what do you think should politicians, right, have the ability to be doing business in the United States or outside the United States in China? You know, does that detract from the entire idea of having the free market and being able to do business wherever you want? Obviously, we want to have foreign investment in our country, but if you're a U.S. politician, should that void some of those things for you? Just like as military members, some
Yeah.
of the rights that we have that other American or we don't have that other Americans do, like when you sign on that line, you kind of lose some of those abilities. You know what I mean? Should that come as a cost? What do you think?
I I think so, to try to take any kind
Mhm.
of corruptiveness out of it. Is it gonna go away? I don't know, man. I don't think it ever will. It's to that point to where like that beast is so strong for those politicians, and there's so much money involved. Money buys everything for those people. Um, it's the bureaucracy in general is just it is very
Killing
rampant.
us.
Yes, it is very real. It's very rampant. Um, I don't even know what the process would be to even try to get them out and like have it like have like the people kind of try to take over and put their
Right.
thoughts and opinions into something like that because these politicians
Dude.
and this government is so strong.
Well, it is, man. And really the only process to get anybody out is to vote them out. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, that is such a crapshoot, because you have people that, well, all of us, right? We all look at life through different lenses. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And some people choose to look at life through multi lenses, and some people choose to look at life through the MSNBC or the Fox News lens or whatever.
Right.
And they just make decisions based on their whims and the single source information that they get without actually looking into things. And
Hmm.
I don't think that the majority of Americans don't want to see our country succeed. I just think that the majority of Americans are overloaded with information that it's hard to make decisions, and it's hard to make informed decisions because there's so much disinformation and misinformation out there that you're just kind of voting with what you think is right. And I think that's how most people are. But the short answer to your question is the only way to get rid of those people and those policies is to vote them out. And that starts at the lowest level, right? Your local officials who want to become state officials, who want to become federal politicians, right, representing the United States government as a whole, right? So it starts there, man. When you see somebody who's running for a certain office, municipally, pay attention. What are they saying? What platforms are they running on? And obviously someone could be lying, you know what I mean? But people have
Governor
track
Newsom.
records. A lot of things are public record now. People's decisions are voting is all public record, all that stuff,
Yeah.
right? Pay attention to it because it matters, and you can see that it matters by the shit show that's going on right now. Those people don't get to Congress. I mean, very few people get to Congress without first going through some sort of process. They're leveling up, and in their offices that they hold.
It's just one of those like to keep touching base on that. Like I'm not trying to be like pessimistic, but it's just like
No, you're good, man.
for example, um, God, man, the only person I can think of right now, because I live here, is Governor Newsom. Like
Bro.
people have voted against this guy like tremendously, but then the thing is not to go down like that rabbit hole, but I mean, the only thing that really keeps them in is just the money and all these like. It, I understand like where we're at. I have ran into a lot of Americans that are against Governor Newsom. They're against like this whole crazy outlook on the left side. I understand that. And I'm sure if you trickle down towards this, Southern California, it might be different people. But, that's why everyone's like, oh, California is like such a blue state. I
It's the
really,
cities. It's
dude,
the cities in California.
exactly. Exactly. And, yeah, it's just he is such a crapshoot. I don't care what anybody thinks about this guy. My honest opinion, he is he is the spawn of Satan, and he is not a good individual. I will never forget when COVID first happened, and people can look this up. It is open source. When COVID happened and he was shutting down all the freaking businesses and shutting down California, a lot of people seem to forget that Governor Newsom owns and has stocks in wineries. And what was he doing?
Mhm.
He was
Okay.
hiring and had hired illegal immigrants to keep his wineries open. So you're shutting down your state of California, but then you still are keeping your winery open and you have illegal immigrants working for you. I don't care what race they are. Illegal immigrants working for you and you're shutting down your state, but yet you want to keep your business
Well,
going.
yeah, at the end of the day, man, you're boxing other people out from maintaining their lifestyle, and really all you're telling them is figure it out.
Mhm.
right? But your brain, this is like Nancy Pelosi getting caught in that salon when all the businesses were supposed to be locked down. You remember that? She's on video getting her hair done. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it's just it's the hypocrisy. And I agree with you, man. I think Gavin Newsom is one of the like when you look at that guy, he just looks like he's trying to sell you a car. He's the greasy, hey man, this isn't a piece of shit, whatever, dude.
Yeah.
And his campaign now talking about like going door to door and talking about corruption and quote fascism in other states and how they're hitting, he said in his commercial, he's like, we're hitting the road, right? And his initiative about Americans and all this shit, it's just like, dude, you are so full of crap.
What a
Like the
hypocrite.
only people that, dude, I know the only people voting, I mean, obviously there's a lot of people voting for him because he didn't lose the recall election that happened to try and replace him,
Yeah.
right? And even though he didn't lose, this should tell you a lot about what people think about him. The fact that the state of California tried to recall their governor. Okay, but the dude is just when you think of everything that's wrong in politics today, he is like the poster boy for it.
Mhm.
Anyway, I'll get off my Gavin Newsom's a piece of shit soapbox, but he's a piece of shit.
Yeah, I second that nature.
I can't believe that dude wants to run for president, man.
There's no shot. No shot.
Dude, I would rather shit in my hands and clap than vote for that guy.
Okay. Let me I just want to you just brought it up. I want not the shit in the hands clap,
Mm-hmm.
but that's funny.
Yeah.
Um with this whole like fake voting and all this bullshit going on, I am so
You know, like voter
terrified.
fraud.
I'm sorry. Yeah, fake voting, voter frauds.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like voter fraud. Okay,
Yeah.
just understanding you.
Yeah, that is terrifying to me because of what happened. Everybody knows this. 83 million or 83,000 votes, or I don't know, remember what it was. 83 million votes or something like that, the
Mm-hmm.
most in history. There's no
Mm-hmm.
effing way. And there was so
Mm-hmm.
much stuff on the news. I don't care what news outlet people are watching. There were people that were deceased in counties that were voting and
Yeah,
they got caught. There was people in the freaking military that were sending in their ballots and voting, and then they find
absentee
them.
ballots. Yeah.
Yeah, they find them in the trash cans blocks away, thrown away in trash cans. And then I think it was like 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning. Trump was climbing the charts, and then all of a sudden it just completely deadlined. And then Biden jumped
Mm-hmm.
ahead by like double digit thousands, almost 100,000 votes out of nowhere at 2 o'clock in the morning when it
Mm-hmm.
is supposed to be closed. But they still kept counting. And then this is the only election, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but they were still taking in ballots like a week later after the time. Oh, they were sent in the mail. We still got to count them in, and they're late. Like they shouldn't even count those,
Mm-hmm.
but they're letting them count.
Mm-hmm.
And then they're letting these people coming across the border. Oh my God, dude.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I can't say with 100% assurance that this is the first election where we've like counted ballots after the fact, but it's definitely not the first election where its integrity has been called into question. And in my lifetime, the one that really like stands out to me the first time was the whole Bush and Kerry election with Florida, the hanging chads, all that stuff.
Oh,
And
okay.
the other thing with it too is the hypocrisy from a lot of politicians.
Hmm.
Hillary Clinton lost to Trump, and what did she blame it on? Right, Russian involvement, and try to basically say that the results of the election, were partially fraudulent. Just like Stacey Abrams in Georgia running for governor, right? Tried to say that the election from her was fraudulent, and even though she lost, right? There's a lot of election denying on both sides. Um, so but the problem with it is the fact that we're even questioning the integrity of our voting process, and
Yeah.
that's a massive problem.
Yeah.
And dude, it just to me it's like you need to develop something that people feel comfortable going in and voting and knowing that their vote is going someplace and it's not being lost, it's not being not counted
Yeah.
or whatever. And to go back to California, you now have to vote by mail in the state of California.
So dumb.
You have to vote by mail in the state of California. Yep. Like I'm sorry, but that does. It just creates a lot of opportunities for, your vote not to count, man. Like it not
On
even
purpose.
intentionally. Yeah, dude, how many times does people's mail get lost on accident because these people that work at the post office are swamped,
Hmm.
and some letter falls somewhere or whatever, like
Hmm.
it just mailing in ballots to me is not a wise thing to do. I get why we discussed that when COVID was going on. But you know, this is 2023.
Yep.
There are a lot better ways to do things than manually doing them by filling in bubbles on a sheet, sticking it in the mail, and having to just trust that something that affects so much about your life is going to make it exactly where it's supposed to be and make it exactly on time to be counted, and all this stuff, dude. There's just too many limiting factors, lim facts, that exist in that process for me to feel comfortable about it. But I
Hmm.
still vote. I
Who,
mean, because I live in California, it has to be by mail.
who knows, man? It might be on a train and it might derail. You never know.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's very true. Or it could wind up on a Chinese naval base in West Africa. Somehow because of the mail.
Yeah, let's touch base on that Navy base that is in
Oh,
West Africa for
navy
the
bases.
Atlantic influence that you have.
Mm. Um. Well, yeah. I mean, the Chinese are building ports on that side of the world there in the Atlantic, with the intention of using them at some point for military, their navy specifically. But it doesn't take a genius to see why that's a problem for sure,
Yeah.
because you now have a Chinese military that can push its assets around, and has ports to go to and reestablish, or get fuel and resources, can push farther out into the world. They're building. Maybe I have to look this one up, but
Yeah. What's
they
up?
just got an agreement to build another naval a navy base in another country in the Indo-Pacific. Just a couple days ago, I saw it on the news. But all of this is establishing a Chinese footprint around the world, and it's to compete with the United States, and it's to support things like the Belt and Road Initiative. It's things to support other Chinese interests around the world, BRICS
Mhm.
interests around the world. So, when you think about all the ways that, again, we keep kicking this dead horse, but the way that China's involved itself, you know, building bases around the world, buying up U.S. farmland, owning, intermediary companies in the United States to steal technology, to steal money through financial institutions like BlackRock, all these ways, dude. There's not a single solitary thing I could think of that they don't have their hands on, and it's just growing and growing and growing. That Chinese influence and footprint around the world, man.
Yeah, so I don't know if this is
And even when I was in Djibouti, there is a Chinese naval base. And
it's true.
Djibouti is East Africa, but there's a Chinese naval base right there next to an American one. And when I was deployed to another location in Africa, there was a Chinese port being built. Aaron brought it up in our
It's not
podcast.
too
We've
far
been at
away,
the same
right?
location. Yeah, no, dude, it's 5 clicks
Yeah.
max, right? As the crow flies, and it's crazy to think about. Not I don't know what the United States could do to stop it, but that they just let the biggest threat to our way of life and our military establish bases that close to us, and then you got countries like Kenya being like, "Hey, throw your U.S. dollars in the trash because they're not going to be worth a lot here in the next couple of weeks." I mean, that the Kenyan president said that on live TV.
I did see that. I saw him speak about that and he was kind of like laughing essentially.
Right.
Is
Right.
it were you talking about Cambodia? That
Yeah.
was okay, yeah. They're saying China is secretly building a PLA naval facility in Cambodia,
Mhm.
for obviously,
I
like you
just
said, the use of the military. So,
Mhm. Yeah, it's to project Chinese power out into the ocean as they develop their navy, from being more of like a coastal defense force to
Mhm.
being what we call a blue water navy, like the United States.
Correct.
you know, they need bases like that. That's why the United States has bases in the Pacific, for our aircraft, our naval assets to dock and land and resupply. I mean, we have nuclear powered warships, aircraft carriers, and things like that that don't
Mm,
need fuel, obviously.
right.
But people that work on those ships need food, right? I mean, and it's just I'm just the point I'm trying to make is that all of this is to be able to maintain a permanent global footprint, and eventually become the world power. And it's so easy to do this when you can just go into these third world countries with
Yeah,
all
here
this
you
money,
go.
and the plan is to just put them into so much debt that they know that they probably know they're never going to be able to pay it back, and all they really care about is having presence in that country so they can take resources and use the land and the coastline to build bases, to build airports, right? That they'll use not just for commercial aircraft, but military aircraft and ports that won't just be for commercial shipping, will be eventually for Chinese ships. And it's wild to me. And we sit here and we've talked about it for however long we've been talking about it, and there's still new stuff to say, you know.
Yeah,
And it's only happened because the United States has let it happen.
yeah, and thank you for touching base on the fact of saying that like they're going to build naval bases and military bases because people need to understand that when China goes in and they set these loans to build the infrastructure, highways, their Huawei towers, that what a smart thing to do to come in, like Gresham said, and take over a country economically and infrastructure wise to be like, we know they're not going to be able to pay it back. Let's start building military bases and facilities and start setting up
Mhm.
all over the place, like you said, to where it's going to get out of 151 countries. If China had freaking military bases on every single one of those, holy cow, bro. Like massive
Yeah.
back us into a corner that I have ever seen. And that's what they're doing. They are going to come in, they're going to take over these other third world countries. They're going to set up the infrastructure that they need long term, right? In some other places they're working a lot faster than others for obvious reasons, but to
Mhm.
come in to set up bases, set up their infrastructure, I mean, it's scary, bro. It's moving. They're like taking over. It's just like
Oh,
it's
literally.
wow. Yeah, it's awful.
Yeah, man. It is awful. But it really just kind of ties into one of the things that you and I have talked about a lot in it's competing American and Chinese interests, and what that eventually will come to, right? And whether it will have some sort of amicable resolution where I don't know, we decide one day to just move forward together and try to share the world in a multipolar world and try to develop that, without competing and destroying everything, which I don't
Mhm,
think is going to happen. That's like best
mhm.
case scenario, or best case scenario would be United States leading the world for sure. But avoiding conflict would be outstanding. But I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think conflict is going to be avoided. And that whole concept of the Thucydides trap, where the rising and the falling powers are competing against one another and having to
Right.
fight it out, I think that we've reached, the point of no return on that the event horizon, so to speak, and there will be conflict. I think one day between the United States and China.
You think that'll be Taiwan?
I very likely, yeah, I
Yeah.
do, and I think that the Chinese will do a lot to try and assimilate Taiwan into
Mm,
China, economically, through inviting businesses to do business there from Taiwan into China and vice versa. I think they'll try to do a lot. They do a lot to try to influence ideologies in the United States. That they would do the same there in Taiwan to try and get people to realize that the one China policy is what they should be thinking. But eventually, I think that there will be certain things that will happen, that they realize they need to do something, right? And take, whether it's some sort of opportunistic thing where the U.S. military is preoccupied somewhere else and they just go do it because let's be real. Um, if the Chinese got a day or two to go and do that without knowing they don't have to worry about American influence or involvement in preventing that from happening, that could happen in a matter of days. A
Mhm.
Chinese takeover of the island of Taiwan. It's not that big,
Right.
right? But yeah, no, I do. I think we've reached a point where eventually there will be some sort of military conflict, and that the best way to go about sort of limiting the global destruction that has is to essentially a have to rely on our allies. Okay.
Right.
I know that the French and Italian navies are moving some of their assets into the Pacific to assist the United States. Obviously, we have the AUKUS coalition, the United States, the UK, and Australia.
Mhm.
Go ahead.
Was it Australia or New Zealand? I think it's Australia that they're talking about old school putting like the sea mines around because to try to like
Hmm.
deter like Chinese like submarines or something like that.
Yeah, I think I saw that too, and I'm pretty sure it's
Yeah.
Australia. New Zealand definitely has a different stance on the
Mm.
Chinese. They have a lot more of a, I guess you could say, friendly relationship with the
Right.
Chinese. They're a lot smaller than Australia. They don't have a lot of the freedoms that are afforded to the Australians because they are so small. Not to mention, they have a lot of different policies that don't really align with what the United States essentially is trying to do with Australia and the UK. So that's an interesting
Mhm.
one. I think eventually, in solidarity, New Zealand will completely fall in line with all of that.
Mhm.
But they definitely do have a different perspective
Right.
on what's going on in the Pacific. But yeah, no, the new was it new nuclear submarines
Mm.
deal with Australia and the UK and the United States. So we talked about making the right sorts of moves. Like those are the right sorts of moves in the Pacific. Having our allies mass, some of their navy assets and naval assets and aircraft assets in the Pacific, helping some of our allies in that region bolster their militaries and the things that they're doing to generate deterrence. The Philippines giving us the ability to build
I saw
military
that.
bases there, and
Yep.
dude, the one thing that doesn't get enough attention, in my opinion, is India. Okay, and India is another super or another country that has the ability to become a top three for sure global power. Okay, I don't want to say
Yep.
superpower. Um, and can kind of help offset what China is doing in that region. They are right there. Unfortunately, they are a part of BRICS, but again, they're also a part of what we call the Quad with the United States. But India is one of those weird countries that won't necessarily align itself with one country or another entirely. And I think that has a lot to do with the fact that India kind of sees itself as a superpower, right?
Yeah, I can see
And
that.
wants the kind of respect that countries like the United States and now China are sort of
Mm.
garnering for themselves.
Mhm.
They, like I said, they are a part of BRICS, but they also have a lot of economic interests that don't align with the Chinese, and they've had border disputes with the Chinese.
I know that's a big
In the
clash.
United States it is, and but the U.S. has tried to court India all the way back to President Truman, and it's not always gone the way Washington would like it to go.
Mhm.
And the leaders of India have always kind of done their own thing. And a lot of that has to do with just wanting India to be one of those prominent countries and be able to make decisions for its own without having to kind of kowtow to another country completely and totally. But that is such a swing
Sleeper.
country, I guess you
Yeah.
say, like, well, sleeper, but like, we like to say swing states,
I know.
when we
Yeah.
talk about like voting, right? Like,
Mhm.
you know, what is Florida going to do in this election, right? To
Right.
change the direction of it. But India 100% is like a swing country that frankly we need in order to help counteract what's going on in China. And if for some reason tomorrow India came out and said, "Yep, throwing in all of our chips in this hat with China," like that would be pretty devastating. And aside from the fact that India is another country that controls a lot of waterways and controls a lot of shipping routes and commerce, and
Mhm.
another country that's really 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 looking to have a lot of infrastructure and manufacturing ability brought into it. the United States not to have the largest piece of that pie with them and kind of do a lot to offer better alternatives than the Chinese are, it would be a massive fault to us and definitely need them. But that's not something that gets enough attention, in my opinion, is what's going on with the United States and India.
I just feel that we're not the way it's going and the decisions that are being made and what's being brought up, and it could just be like a smoke and mirror of like the news and everything that's getting fed to us, but I just really
Hmm.
feel that like the United States are not even looking into making these decisions because China has beat them to the punch in a few different aspects. And the United States is just going to fall back to this country where we're backed into a corner and everything is just going to be, kind of like essentially like if it comes to a conflict, just like proxy wars here and that because we're obviously not going to be making the moves to push back and try to go to these other countries and offer money and X, Y, and Z. And then, like you said, India, there's an article that I read, and I think we talked about it on the third episode. I'm not 100%
Hmm.
sure, but they're saying that like China is going to essentially take over like number one economically superpower, yada, 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 by like
Oh yeah.
2030, by 2033. And then they said
Hmm.
India, like you said, which I'm glad you
Hmm.
brought up, they said India is going to follow suit, but it's going to be a whole lot later. But they
Yeah, like
are,
2050. Yeah,
yeah, they're right
mhm.
there, like
But
you said.
basically what it said is by like 2030, 33 or 35,
Mhm,
China will have overtaken the United States as the number one economic superpower.
mhm.
So the United States would fall to number two. And if things keep going the way they are, that India by 2050 will have taken over the number two spot and the United States would be third, right?
Yep.
And that obviously a lot could change between then and now. And you talk about 2035, like that's 10 years from now, but essentially like a little more than 10 years.
Yeah, I got you.
A lot can happen, but when you think about like what 10 years ago was 2013, like that goes by in the blink of an eye. You know what I mean? So a lot has to change trajectory wise in the United States to prevent that from happening. And obviously, there's a lot of conversation about the economic issues and the population issues, and obviously all the corruption and the control that the Chinese
Mm.
exert on their people, and especially with what happened with COVID, welding people into their houses. They got
Oh my
drones
god,
flying
dude,
around
yeah.
spraying Lysol spray into the air like it's doing shit, telling people to
Yeah.
telling people to deny their soul's desire to be free. Like, dude, I just can't even imagine having to live like that, right? But um,
Remember that
it's just
video of that
dude,
guy
it's so
breaking in? They broke into that family's home in China. Like, they were knocking on the door, and then they
yeah,
just started donkey kicking the door, and then they broke into that
yeah,
family. Like,
yep.
there's no way you'd get
Yanking people
shot.
out, man. And dude, yeah, you would, dude. There would be somebody, some good old boy, but on the other side of the
Mhm.
door with a 30-06 and would, turn your head into a canoe,
Yep.
right, to steal a line from Tombstone because it's a great movie.
There you go.
But anyway, dude, like, yeah, dude, I remember videos the entire time, when like COVID was a thing, right?
Yeah.
Of the Chinese, I don't even know what you call them. I don't know if those guys were medical professionals or medical
All those freaking
employees or some sort of
dweebs.
police wearing all that, the protective gear, locking up apartment buildings and beating the shit out of people for getting out of their houses and stuff like that. Like it's absolute was absolutely insane. And obviously there were a lot of protests that happened in China over the past year, and they've opened back up, so to speak. But dude, that's what you get when you live in a police state run by a gruesome dictator who is exacting a genocide in their country right now, with the Uyghur people. It's
Mhm.
just that's what you get, man. But that's the enemy. Those are the people that want to replace the United States at the top of the world. And the United States is not without its mistakes, but I'll tell you right now, the world is a lot better when America leads, and it would not be a better place if you had countries like China and Iran and Saudi Arabia and some of these other piece of crap, leaders that would love to see their interests projected and be at the top of the food chain.
Yeah, definitely when
But
America
yeah,
leads,
man.
like you said, is it's a whole lot better of a place. It's peaceful, it's calm. There's positivity going around from what I've seen, and it's it's scary.
man.
Like we said earlier, it's a scary thought, dude, of where it could go, what could happen, and the fact that, like we touched base earlier, it can change in an instant if it goes that route. And these people that are trying to, that are so gung ho about protecting transgender and critical race theory, and you got to wear the mask, and it's like, what are the like? Are we gonna really like? Do you think those people are gonna have the balls to be like, oh, shit's hit the fan. Now what do we do? They're gonna run. They're gonna hide and tail between their legs.
I'll put it this way, man. We are not in a position as a country anymore to focus on stuff like that if we want to enjoy the lifestyle we have. Being able
Mhm.
to focus on what bathrooms you're going to use or who gets to participate in what sports are the problems, are the first world problems of a country that doesn't have to worry about an enemy knocking at its door, right?
Mhm.
And all that crap is going to fall to the wayside if something like that happens, where the United States winds up in a conflict with the Chinese in the Pacific, and then it expands, to World War III or whatever, and hope that never happens, right? But none of that is going to matter. There's not going to be something that's making the news if something like that happened,
Yep.
and unfortunately that's all people what a lot of, I shouldn't say all people, but a lot of people care about. It has nothing to do with preserving American way of life and the way of life for a lot of people around the world, man. And that's why I say, conflict with the Chinese, in my opinion, is going to happen at some point, because I feel like that is kind of almost the only thing that's going to
Has to.
pull us out of that rut, man. And it's a unfortunate truth, in my opinion. And there's a lot we need to do before that happens. And I think that we are making some of the right moves. But you know, I think one of the best ways, if we do wind up in a conflict like that, what do you think the United States needs to do immediately to win?
I don't know why, but the first thing that comes to my head if we get into a conflict with China, and like, are you saying like legit like World War, like, or just like a proxy war, like
Yeah,
what?
like no, let's it's some no something happens. The United States and China are going at it legitimately, military on military. What immediately, what sort of things need to happen? The United States and its allies to win that,
Yeah. So
if that makes sense.
right. So it took the words out of my mouth in that sense. And allies is I would, uh, you know, we're not going to be anything without the allies. Definitely going to need the support. For what we're doing in Ukraine, those countries are going to have to do that with us. And the one
Mm,
thing that I've always like
you're
thought
right.
about and like stuck in my head is, when you kind of go after the enemy, essentially what do you go for, man? You go for comms. And the thing is that
Hmm.
China, we have telephone poles, right? I'm not saying China doesn't, but this is what they did. So they saw the technology in these cell towers because the United States came out with the cell towers, right? So China looked at it
Hmm.
and was like, okay, cool. They have these telephone poles and they've got these cell towers. Now they made their cell towers, but if comms go down in that sense for those towers, they don't have anything to fall back on like we do, like landlines. But
Okay.
if you hit supplies and take out communications, I think that is a very good thing as well. Um, and then of course the support of all of NATO and allies, but China has like so much ground and so much infrastructure all over the world. I mean, dude, there is so much like equations that go into that and so much like hypothesis and like what we really need to do, but I mean, we really need to beef up the
Hmm.
Indo-Pacific. We really need to show more presence, I think, and kind of, I don't know, man, just beef up that presence. And then, of course, we can touch base on this after, but like,
Deterrence.
yeah, not to forget about like North Korea as well. But yeah, that deterrence,
Oh yeah.
we need to beef up that Pacific side of it because that's where they're coming.
Hmm. No, I agree with you, man. I think I'd like to talk about North Korea for sure, because they're
Yeah.
definitely like the idiot little brother in that area that's just gonna will just do whatever it's told, and it doesn't care, right? But
Yeah.
um, I think if we got into a conflict with China in the Pacific, that the United States and its allies needs to do everything it can to contain it to that region, make not this is easier, it's easier said than done. Containment, make it as short of a conflict as possible. um if if the United States gets into a conflict with the Chinese, it's going to need its allies, like you said. So I think those moves of moving countries' naval assets and aircraft and all of that into that area,
Mhm.
and then that concept of containing that conflict to the Pacific also means that you're denying the Chinese the ability to rely on its allies, which goes back to what we said before about keeping Russia bogged down in a conflict in Ukraine. The United States is a lot more capable of maintaining a conflict in two theaters if it needs to. The Russians are not going to be able to do that
No.
to support China in the way that the Chinese really would need that sort of support. Because when you think about it, who else do the Chinese have to fall back on the way the United States has our other allies to fall back on?
No
No
one.
one on par with the allies that we have, right? So
Right.
allies, like you said, 100% a policy of containment, keep trying to contain China economically, which honestly is not probably not going to happen.
It's very hard.
But things does not to say that it should stop. Any sort of attempt to do that should stop. It should, but and then containing a conflict like that in the Pacific, keeping it in the Pacific, and doing everything we can to limit their abilities, protecting our bases in that area, to not lose power projection ability, to not lose assets that we have. Not just beefing up our presence in that area, but also beefing up our ability to defend our own assets that exist in that area. Porcupining some of those bases to make them a lot harder targets to hit with missiles and other sorts of attacks like that, to deny us the ability to push assets out the door, so to speak, assets, people, all of that. And those are actions that we can take now. Those are things that can be going on right now, but containing them in the Pacific, in my opinion, and keeping that conflict as scoped down, as scaled down as possible to just that region, is going to be one of the best ways to do that, in my opinion. And we can't afford to lose some sort of conflict like that. Because if the United States loses a toe to toe fist fight, essentially, or something that becomes bigger, an all out brawl around the world, if we lose that with the Chinese, that frankly, that would be it for the United States, as far as everyone, the way that would be looked at. It's like, what's the joke, man? When you go to prison, you're the little dude, you just find the biggest dude on the block and try to fight him, because
Yep. Beat them up.
everyone expects you to lose, but if you win, you look like Jesus. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But um
To touch base on how you're saying that, like, we can't lose those assets and protect them. Some people don't even
mhm.
know, or some people forget. But we don't have, like, something like what I'm about to say is, in the United States, we don't have the like, chip manufacturers. They're over in Taiwan, right? They make the
Oh
super
yeah.
chips. They
Right, right,
make,
right.
yeah. So that's also a huge asset, right? Like, that's where the manufacturing,
Microprocessors.
yeah,
Hmm.
that's where the
Yep.
manufacturing is. That is a
Oh
huge thing
yeah.
for us, because people couldn't get cars for, I couldn't tell you how long, because of a chip shortage. And that's
Right, dude.
another asset that we have, that we need, that we should protect. Some people look at it as like, oh, I don't care. It's the chips, whatever. Yeah, yeah, yeah. But there's so much more to it than just that, and people need to be a little bit more open and realize.
Well, yeah, for sure, man. And the thing that you're touching on is American manufacturing needing to come back, or manufacturing in the United States needing to come back and
Mhm.
becoming independent again, right? What real energy independence looks like is the United States not having to rely on other countries like China for lithium, for car batteries, electric car batteries, or for wind farms and stuff like that. Bringing back a lot of these American capabilities to build our own stuff, not have to worry about if we had another pandemic. You saw how crazy the supply lines fell off. If you had all that manufacturing in the United States, you wouldn't have these issues, right? And that's just kind of what was one of these tertiary effects of corruption, and people trying to make more money that way, and knowing it's causing harm, right? But also of just the free market, and moving companies outside of the United States, but having that capability again to build things in our country, like microprocessors and anything else you can think of, right? having those abilities, being actually energy independent, like those things that you're touching on, those are the massive moves that the United States needs to start doing. And it also would tie into offering better alternatives to some of these countries that want to ally themselves with the Chinese. Because if the United States was more capable of offering better alternatives in business to these countries, they wouldn't have to turn to countries like China and they're just getting bent over the table, so to speak, and getting screwed. So,
Yeah.
but
Um,
yeah, man, it's just, do you think the United States can right the ship, so to speak?
I hope so, dude. I'm trying to be optimistic about it. I really, obviously, I want to, right? I mean, all should. It is just very scary at China in the BRICS. Um, can they right the ship? I think if we get the right administration again, the right president,
Where
and
it begins.
yeah, I really think that is going to be a turning, that can be a turning point into, and like how you're saying earlier, like, China, they tell their people, like, look at America, it's so bad back and forth, and it's, like with this whole like Democrats and Republicans and back and forth every other time in the presidency, and one presidency and administration screwing it up for the next 4 years that come along for another president or whatever the case may be. But you get the right people in there that can do the job, um, we're going to flourish, and we've seen it happen before. We have seen ourselves fail. We have seen ourselves succeed and be very successful.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think we can. There I think there's still time, and when we see that opening, we really need to grasp on it and take it. And, I'm just going to go out there and say it, that this next election coming up is going to be extremely vital into the direction of where we're going to go and how things are going to, and what the outcome is going to be. I think that is, I mean, dude, I think that is going to be the end all be all in where we can go.
Dude, I couldn't agree more, man. That is the litmus test for the direction the United States is going to head. And what happens with this next election, so much, I agree with you, hinges on that. And we're coming up on it, and you're going to start seeing a lot of political ads. You're going to start seeing a lot of discussion about policies and anti policies of what's going on. But that is the most important thing I think that has been said in this entire conversation, is that what happens this next election is going to be the determining factor in where the direction the United States goes, whether it's up or down, and the right decision hopefully will be made. And I agree with you that the United States can turn the ship around, so to speak. But it is going to take some serious changes. It's not even just going to take changes in politics. It's going to take changes in mindsets of Americans to realize that we are just all Americans. Okay, that this is, we as the country, the people, that the government is supposed to represent, are the most important thing. Okay, and we need to change some mindsets and get onto topics that are what's most important for just maintaining the lifestyle that we all enjoy, and keeping our country going and not falling second and then third to other countries. And believe me, man, I can't stress enough that your lifestyle will change drastically if this doesn't happen. And I don't know how to say it in plainer English, right? And hopefully I
Yeah.
never have to say it in Chinese. Something, you need to care. People
Dude,
do.
so
I'm
right.
just, I'm,
Yep, yep.
I'm telling you what I'm telling them, man. Like, people need to care. These aren't just conversations that needs to be
Mhm.
happening in the small corners of the podcast world. You and I, with 5 episodes, right,
Yep.
out here eventually. These are conversations that Americans need to be having with one another and making decisions accordingly.
It's a it's gonna be a fast and very, horrible ripple effect, to kind of touch, or to kind of
Horrible.
add more on what you're saying. And, I don't know, man. I don't know what people are, what's in the water, but it's just like this last presidency, or not this last one, sorry, this current presidency, man, I have never seen like the United States just like so against one another. And of course, like I saw some turmoil when Barack Obama was president. Um,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
it's just like it's crazy, man.
There
At the
always
end,
is.
yeah, and at the end of the day, like everybody here, Americans, we should all want the same thing. We all want to flourish and be prosperous. And, it's just, I don't know, it's the way things are going and like how it's being set up, man. It is so evil.
I think that it's become a culture to almost not care what happens to our country, and almost
Right.
there is, and you can go find examples of this all over social media of people that are like, man, fuck this country, and I hope our country fails, and we've done so much wrong in the world, and yada yada yada. That they don't care, and they just want to see. It's like, dude, do you not realize that if we fail as a country, that you fail, that you're
Hmm.
not just gonna you know the new quote unquote Chinese overlords aren't gonna find your video of you saying fuck the US on Instagram and be like, here's your free pass.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it just, dude, I just don't understand how you can not care about what happens to your country. And it's again realizing that we're not just a bunch of different little individuals, but I mean, really, that is what the American experiment was, is taking a bunch of cultures and being that melting
Sure.
pot, right?
Yeah.
But you have to realize that you can do that together and celebrate the diversity that we have, and find the strengths in that, and not find the differences, right? that's
That's why
it's
America's so
hard,
great.
but
Everybody
it has
comes
to
here to
happen,
have a
man.
better life. Everybody comes here for
Every literally,
freedom.
dude.
I mean, I
Yep.
couldn't tell you how many people
Yep.
like everyone wants to come here because of freedom, a better life, education. I mean, holy cow, dude, like medicine. I mean,
Dude,
Jesus.
I have been all over the world. From the course of my life, from my dad being active duty and me being active duty, and I have literally met people in every single country that has found out that I'm an American in one way or another. Talk about how much they've wanted to come here. Talk about the opportunities that
Yeah.
this country has, and just talk about how much that they know they could benefit from being here. And anybody can.
Hmm.
It's just, to me, again, we keep saying this over and over and over again. It's crazy that people don't want to see our country flourish, that live here and enjoy the lifestyle that this country has made for them. But
Yeah,
anyway, yeah,
we
man,
had
this was a really good conversation, dude.
no, this was a really good episode. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I felt like we touched base on a lot of things, and I felt like
Hmm.
that we covered a plethora of stuff that people probably didn't think about. And then now that we brought them
Yeah,
up in the topics, they're like, "Oh shit, there's this. Oh wait, they talked about that." And
yeah.
then, and
I hope somebody learned something, man.
I really do. The people that listen, thank you guys. We really hope you guys take into account that this stuff is real. It is happening. We're not just making this up. Everything is open source. I mean, you
True.
just educate yourself. That's all I try to tell people. How do you know about
Hmm.
this? Google it. Like pull it up. And
Yeah, man.
yeah, I loved it.
It's true.
I loved it.
Yeah. Well, I think that we're gonna wrap this one up. In
Yeah.
the next one, we're gonna have another special guest. You
Yes,
guys,
sir.
we're gonna have a special guest. I'll drop some deets online eventually about our next special guest, but it's someone that Chris and I have a lot in common with. I'll just put it that way.
Yeah.
And I think it's gonna be a really good one. I'm looking forward to that one. And then obviously the one after that is going to be our first ever fan suggested episode on the paranormal,
Yeah.
and we're working on guests right now for that one too.
Yeah.
It's going to be a good one. And yeah, man, dude, I appreciate you sitting down with me tonight and having that conversation, dude.
Yeah,
It was an important one.
this is one that I think this is one of the top 2 that we talked about before we even made this podcast. Man, we got to talk about this.
100%.
And
We got to do this.
I think obviously there's definitely going to be like a part 2 as the days go on. There's more stuff coming out and
Yes.
information and conflicts. This is an ongoing part 2, part 3, part 4
Yeah.
series. And
Yep.
there's a lot to cover, and I think for what we covered in this one, we definitely knocked it out of the park. Um, and
I couldn't agree more.
yeah, and we just want to thank you guys like we do all the time. Whether it's in the beginning of the podcast, at the end of the podcast, on the social media accounts. Um, we appreciate you guys' support and listening and kind of giving a shit, about us, and hearing what we have to say that is so real that may or may
Definitely.
not be covered on, social media. But look forward to the coming episodes. Like, Gresham said, we have a special guest, and we got the fan one on episode 7.
Yep.
And
Let us know
people,
what you think about this episode too. Give us some
yeah,
feedback on what you want to hear.
yeah,
We encourage all sorts of involvement in our social media sites and all that stuff. Even if you have something to say that you disagree with, please
yeah,
do it.
yep.
So,
Yeah, make
cool,
sure
man.
you guys go on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, like, comment, subscribe, turn on your notifications, go through our Facebook, our Instagram. We greatly appreciate it. And we're signing out on this episode 5, Looking Over the Precipice. And we will catch you guys back on episode 6 with our special guest. Thank y'all.